All right, what up, guys? We are live. So we got part two of our debate with Vaush. So yeah, man, it's good to chat with you again. I think the big disappointment with our first debate was that it was too civil. We just wound up agreeing on too much shit. But fortunately, I think we're gonna heavily disagree on this. I don't know. We'll have to flesh out like kind of your position, but I think we're gonna have a lot of disagreement on this. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Vaush.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine. Yeah, I'm sure we'll find a couple things we disagree with.
I think on the Andrew Tate issue, we definitely disagree. I'll start off with one thing that we disagree on, that we actually agree on. I was watching your video it was called The Case for Why Andrew Tate Should Be Banned. Actually, first off, let me ask this question out of professional courtesy. Is there any words I can't say on your stream because you're streaming right now? Is there any words you want me to avoid?
You should be fine. I mean, I'd avoid the hard R just as a matter of courtesy, but outside that, should be fine.
Okay, so I just say like R thing, right? Like something like that, refer to it that way.
Oh, yeah, like the N-word hard R.
Oh, that, okay, yeah.
Oh, no, you can say retard if you want.
Okay, I was talking about R-A-P.
Oh, no, you're good. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. I'm just making sure because I saw in one of your videos you bleeped it out, so I wasn't sure what your policy was.
Oh, that's just for the videos themselves. The streams always get demonetized anyway.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'll start off with on the one thing that we agree on when it comes to the Andrew Tate thing, and that is I agree with you when you said the big reason why he got deplatformed is he got too popular too fast. That was my thought initially as well. I think when you get so popular so fast, it's a double-edged sword. Once you get the popularity, but two, you're under a lot more scrutiny. So I think on that point, you and I very much agree.
Yeah, well, I mean, moderation on social media platforms is never going to be perfectly consistent. It's always going to be moderated through the attention economy and what gets focused on the most at any given point in time. So it makes sense that with his meteoric rise, he would attract all that attention so quickly, and that would cause the problems.
Yeah. Now here's where the disagreement starts. So you said, and this is a direct quote, I think Andrew Tate being deplatformed is good, right? Another thing, well, actually, we'll just stick on that for a second and we'll move on to the next thing. So what is your case for why is it good?
Well, I think it's at least on my end of the aisle, it's pretty self-evident that Tate's like a monstrously bad human being on almost every level. Like on a professional and ethical level, like the information he distributes, the way he distributes it, everything about him just seems to be sort of maximized for worsening the world that we live in. And given that, I think that it's perfectly okay to sort of cultivate what gets the attention, the broader social media sphere. We've always had processes for that, as far back as human civilization goes. If you're disliked enough, if you're causing enough trouble, eventually you will be taken off the soapbox. I think that's okay. By the way, I'm getting a bit of feedback from your mic when you're not talking. Let me see. Is there a StreamYard setting for?
I think I could probably fix that. Yeah, hang on a second. Let me see. Tell me if this solves the issue.
Gotcha.
Is it better now?
That totally fixed it.
All right, cool. All right, keep going.
Oh no, that's it really. Just I'm okay with the cultivation of presented content through terms of service.
Okay, well let's explore that. Why is he a demonstrably horrible human being?
Well, it seems like all the stuff that he promoted was mostly about like contempt for women, that they're like lesser creatures that need to be controlled by men. That he had an incredibly callous attitude towards consent, putting that pretty lightly there. You know, like him saying that they have a lesser, sort of more moderate attitudes, maybe towards sexual assault in Romania. You know, like out here they're less cucked, you know, less feminist with their definitions on some kinds of stuff like that. His main lesson plan just mostly seemed to be about making young men like worse versions of themselves, which is pretty socially destructive. Young men are pretty impressionable and insecure. They're pretty easy to manipulate.
You really feel like most of his content was about putting women down and being shitty to women?
No, I think there was a lot of other stuff, like sort of projecting his insecurities, flashing his wealth, promoting his pyramid scheme, lying to people about the effectiveness of dropshipping and crypto investment. I think he did, like, I mean, he, like, holistically, like, he did a lot. But I do think, like, the sort of predominant drive of his content was, yeah, mostly about, like, fearing, hating, and trying to control women. You know, that was kind of, like, the main driver, I think.
Okay, on that we fundamentally disagree. I think the main driver, and again, I want to clarify, I'm not some big Andrew Tate fanboy. There are things before even he got deplatformed that I publicly disagree with him on, so I don't agree with all his positions. But as far as I saw, and I think as far as a lot of people saw it, the main driver of the main message he was pushing is how can men be better men? Now, some of the ways in which he advocated men becoming better men, I disagree with him on. right? We can disagree on the two, but that was the main thing he was pushing. Now, in terms of women, his position was that women are precious creatures that should be protected, sometimes from themselves. Meaning, like, if he's in a relationship with a girl, he's going to do his best to protect her. Now, personally, that's not an attitude I take with my girlfriend, but I don't see that as being hateful towards women. I just see that maybe being a little outdated, you could say, but I don't see any hate in that.
Well, this is always the attitude that the bigot takes, you know? Slave owners often argue that they were engaging in a kind of paternalistic protection of the slaves, that the slaves, the black African slaves, were naturally stupid and childish, so the selfless white slave owners would provide stuff like food and housing, that it wasn't hate that motivated their interracial relations, but rather a kind of, you know, like, we all do what we can, and, you know, we fit within the slots God gave us. And misogynists tend to be like that too. This, like, you know, I love women, I want to protect women stuff, it's total bullshit. If you're a straight guy, then you loving women should be like a default. It's like a default presumption that kind of comes with the territory. People who talk about how much they love women, like over and over, in between lines on how you have to control your woman to make sure she doesn't cheat on you, and like sort of glib comments on like your propensity towards abuse or your attitudes towards consent, it's really like a defense you're playing. You're like directing attention away. It's like, well, I don't, you know, my attitude to I don't, you know, hate women. I love women, you know. They're just like kind of stupid, and, you know, they need to be like led around, you know, stuff like that. You hear it a lot from his community.
Yeah, we got to unpack a lot of those things you said. So first of all, I think we can agree there's a lot of men who don't love women. There's a lot of men who hate women on the internet. Would you disagree with that?
No, for sure. But like, what do you mean when you say love? Would you agree that somebody can love women? Okay, like, I think Epstein loved women. I think he loved women in a lot of ways. I don't think he treated women well, you know? I don't know what it means to, like, love a woman in the way that a lot of these guys seem to.
Well, are you asking me how I personally love women, or
No,
how I think
I'm
Andrew
sure
Tate
you have
love?
a normative attitude towards it. You know, I'm fine with that. I'm just saying, like, what does it mean when you say you love women? Like, what are you signaling, right? Because, like,
Well, think about it like this.
yeah.
I think this was his attitude towards women. And again, I agree it's outdated, right? But I don't think it's a misogynistic one. The way he saw it was like women are like, you know, like your favorite pet. Like, you love your pet, but you sometimes protect your pet from itself. You keep it from maybe eating bad shit on the ground. Like, I love my dog, you know, but my dog, you know, he's not the smartest thing, right? He sometimes eats shit off the ground that's bad for his stomach. Now, again, I think, you know, I don't think you actually need to do that in a relationship, right? Like, I don't think you actually need to protect your girl from herself. I think that's a major headache. But that in of itself, you can say is silly. You can say that's redundant, outdated. But I don't think you can say that's a hateful attitude towards women.
Well, it's literally thinking they're subhuman and that you have like a right to guide and dictate to them how to live, which is, again, like very comparable to where the slave owners treated slaves, right? Like, you know, we don't hate the Africans. It's like, well, they need leading, they need guidance. Like, that was a big line in terms of like justifying slave ownership, because it made it seem like actually they're, you know, out of the goodness of our heart, we employ them and we give them food and bread and shelter, you know.
Vaush, but that is a false analogy, because there's no choice, there's no consent. So slaves were forced into their position, right? They didn't choose to be slaves; they were forced to be slaves. All the women that Andrew Tate dates chose to date him. That's the big difference there.
Hopefully all the women who had sex with them too. The comparison that I'm drawing is that it's possible to hate a group of people, and that hate is expressed through this like paternalistic, I'm more of a human than you, so like I get to make the decisions. Like, the comparison between women and dogs is really common in like the Tate sphere of like the pickup artist, men's rights, whatever, you know? And there's really no way to believe that without hating women. If you literally think a group of people is subhuman, you can't really get around that, right? Like, comparisons to dogs are historically tied, like, literally to acts of genocide when it comes to, like, the language you use to demean a group or to put them in a different, like, category.
Let me approach it like this. Let me give you another analogy. Think about, like, okay, I'll just draw from my own childhood. My dad was very overprotective, right? My dad clearly loved me, right? But he didn't really let me make up my own mind when I was growing up. So I was like, Dad, I don't want to do karate anymore. I want to play soccer. Oh, that's a big mistake. No, I want you to keep doing karate, right? He was overprotective. Well, that's because he thought that I needed to defend myself. And there's elements of truth to that, right? You know, being able to defend yourself is good. But again, he wasn't like, how you wouldn't say that my dad hated me just because he was being overprotective of me, would you?
Well, no, because you were literally a child. But if you thought that a group of adults were like children, a group that's so disadvantaged that we put them in a different legal and social category, I would also consider that to be a kind of hatred, yeah. because you're again basically saying they're subhuman. Like they're adults, but mentally they're basically children. Like that's,
But
also what they said about the slaves. They actually said that the idea that blacks had naturally childlike minds was actually like one of the overriding like scientific racist like sort of stereotypes that were used throughout the slave period.
But then you would have to bite the bullet and say that liberals actually hate black people, because as you've seen a lot of black content creators like Abba and Jay, whatever, I forget his name, say that like there's a lot of like liberal racism where basically it's not like blatant racism, right? It's just this condescending, like, listen, black people don't really know how to decide what's best for themselves. So we kind of have to help and guide them, right? So if we're going to say, and I don't think that's coming from a bad place, I think that's just white people generally trying to maybe help black people, right? But then you would have to bite the bullet and say all those liberals actually hate black people because they're childizing them, infantizing them, not letting them make up their own mind.
If there was a liberal who said, I think black people are like dogs or children, I would agree that that is racist of them. In the same way that when Tate did it with women, I think it's sexist of him and indicates a hatred for that group. I don't think liberals generally say that, though. There are some who do, but
if liberals are trying to protect black people from themselves and helping them make better decisions for their communities, right, just basically kind of infantizing them and saying that, you know what, we can decide these things a little bit better for you. You wouldn't say that's racism, or would you?
Well, the majority of black people are themselves liberals, so this just seems like a liberals of all races having opinions politically that differ from some black conservatives. I don't think that liberals generally are that paternalistic when it comes to like the political opinions of black people. If a black person has like a bad political opinion, I think you can just like disagree with it. And that's mostly what I see happening. But a lot of black conservatives are like massive crybabies. So like if you criticize them for having a shit take, they'll be like, well, I get to say this because I'm black. And if you point out that's not really an argument, they're like, well, you're telling me, a black person, how to manage my business. Like, well, you must think that I'm stupid. You're the racist, you know? And it's like this infinite cycle that goes nowhere. But Tate has directly invoked, like, women are children, like women are dogs, whatever. Like, they're lesser, you know? If a liberal did that with black people, I think everyone would agree that it's racist. So we have to agree that it's sexist when Tate does it with women.
I think we can disagree on the liberal racism thing. I'll pose the question like this. Do you think it's fair for a man to dictate the terms of his own relationship?
Of course, everyone has a right to. But the terms that you have can obviously say a lot about you ethically, right?
Sure, yeah, right. But it is your, like, so for example, I don't have a right to tell you how to have a relationship with your girlfriend. Meaning, if I think like you're doing something up, it's not my place to come in and say, Vaush, you shouldn't be doing that with your girlfriend.
No, I think you have a right to. Like, if I abused my girlfriend.
No,
Like,
we're assuming nothing illegal has taken place. Meaning, assuming like, I don't know, like let's just say you're in a relationship where once a month you get to go out and fuck another girl, but she doesn't get to fuck anyone else. And I think that's unfair, right? It's not my place to come in and say that.
well, it doesn't have to be illegal, right? Like, you can abuse a partner and gaslight them and like treat them like shit, without like tripping the law. I think you would have a right to criticize me for that. I think that I have a right to like make decisions, but I think that those decisions are open to criticism. Like, legally, I have every right to not allow black people into my house. I can even say that openly. I could say that to a cop. They can't do shit about it. But I still think that would like warrant criticism, right? Like, you could say, even though it's your right to decide who goes into your house, I think you're racist for not allowing black people in.
Okay, yeah, you're right about that, but it's not. The better word is, it's not my place to tell you how to run your relationships, right? That is your decision, not mine.
I'm fine with it. If you have an ethical qualm with something that's part of another person's relationship, I think that's totally fine. I think that like historically, there are plenty of legal things that are kind of like the norm in relationships that are really, really bad. Marital rape wasn't even illegal until a couple decades ago, so you could just rape your wife whenever you wanted with no legal consequences. But I still think you can make the moral criticism, like back in like 1970 or whatever.
Okay. Okay. Let's approach it like this, because I think we're maybe a little bit of a standstill. Tate has a different way of viewing relationships. He views relationships. We agree the fact that he views women as these basically creatures that need to be protected from themselves, right? What is the hate in that? Like, where does the hatred part lie?
I guess it really depends on like hatred, like the definition that you're using. So when I say hatred, like you're literally like treating women like they're subhuman. For me, that's definitionally like a kind of hatred. I find that usually men do this because they're incredibly insecure. They're not really afraid of women like hurting themselves. They're afraid of women's agency. So they'll say like, hey, this is for your own good, and then they'll say like, don't talk to other guys or whatever, because like you should only be interested in me. And it's motivated by insecurity. So I think like the hatred really is of like the stereotype of the pernicious or like a untrustworthy woman, and they're like terrified of it. And a lot of the control and political biases that come out of that are an attempt to try to assuage those insecurities.
Okay. I think we just need to start off by defining hatred, I guess. Okay, so how do you define hatred, Vaush?
When I say hatred, I mean like sort of contemptuous disregard or like depersonalization. But if you want, I can go with like dehumanization. Like the term itself, I think, is replaceable with a few others in terms of like what I would criticize Tate's content for. Like if I would accuse like a paternalistic slave owner, like I don't know, Thomas Jefferson or whatever, of hating black people, but maybe it'd be easier to say like he thought them were subhuman, he dehumanized them.
Okay, so for you, hatred is interchangeable with dehumanization, basically.
Well, they tend to overlap, yeah. I mean, it's really, really difficult to justify dehumanizing a class of people without there being some kind of like deeply rooted emotional like contempt towards them in some form or another. And it's not like Andrew Tate never indicated contempt towards women. That was a pretty frequent feature of his content as well. You know, what women do, when they do something wrong, like how do you punish them? How do you maintain like authority over them? A lot of it came across like pretty contemptuous.
So we partially agree on the fact. I agree with you that there's elements of insecurity in the way Andrew Tate handles relationships. Insecurity, though, is not always the same thing as hatred. You'd have to give me specific examples then of like some hateful things that he has said in reference to women, or in his. Show me an example, like a specific example of contempt that he has for women.
I mean, I think he said that if a woman accused him of cheating, he would like slap them or like hold them down or something. I think he's made a couple comments that sort of indicated he doesn't care about consent. Like like not exactly an affirmative consent kind of guy, like choke them, like make her say yes, that kind of stuff. I don't have like a clip show here. I'm sure if everyone like Google's worst thing Andrew Tates have said, they'll find like a HuffPost article on like some of the more objectionable stuff. But the hatred stuff isn't really like the predominant thing. Even if there was no like hatred in him, like the dehumanization's enough for me. That hits the point just fine.
Okay. Well, so the slap thing, that was a joke, though. Like you do know that, right?
I mean, yeah, people like him tend to say a lot of stuff that's jokes, I think. It's pretty difficult to tell because it fits perfectly in line with like all the politics he advocates for. So like, it's like a joke, right? And I've seen enough Andrew Tate fans to know like they have a pretty contemptuous attitude towards what you might call like a feminist affirmative consent model of sex having. So yeah. Again, like you can clip share like infinitely back and forth, and this is a joke and that's a joke and this is out of context, whatever. But at the end of the day, you agree with me. Like he literally thinks of humans like a lower type of person. That for me is sufficient to
humans as a lower type, or woman, you mean?
Or sorry, as women, like a women lower type of humans, my bad. So that to me justifies like literally everything that you would like criticize him for.
I don't know if I would phrase it like that. I think he thinks women need to be protected from themselves. At least the woman that he's in a relationship with, or that a guy gets in a relationship with. I don't know if that actually means that he thinks they're lower. I just think he thinks they're different. Meaning, like, we can agree that women are physically weaker, right? Like, so if I'm walking down the street with my girlfriend and someone threatens us, it makes more sense for me to be the one that physically gets involved because I'm a lot stronger than her. My girlfriend's 5 feet tall. So he just goes a little bit further with that line and thinks, well, women, maybe are a little bit more emotional. They tend to make more rash decisions. So maybe it's your duty, if you're in a relationship with your girlfriend, to protect her from making bad decisions. I don't think he thinks it's inferior. It's just different. But women, for example, might be better when it comes to like, emotional stuff. Like when I say emotional stuff, I mean like, social situations, right? Like reading the room, or maybe maternal things and stuff like that. So I just think he thinks they're different things. Not one is better or worse than the other.
The problem is like, that's what they always say, right? Like white supremacists will say the same thing. Like, I don't believe white people are better than black people. We're just different, like good at different things. White people are good at civilization, math, science, intelligence, and everything, and black people are good at basketball. The implication's always there. And also like the comparison between women and dogs and or children, like dogs and or children aren't like different kinds of adults. They're like legally and capability wise like worse than adults. Children are literally underdeveloped and dogs are literally not human. But these are frequent comparisons that are made. if the
Well,
only
those are comparisons I made, just for the record, not Tate. I said those things.
no, I know, but like he has as well. The comparison between women and dogs has been like a pretty common men's pickup artist thing for a long time. And dogs and children are lesser to adult humans, kind of by definition, right? Um, it's if it was just like, oh, if you're a guy, like you should use your superior strength to help in situations where that's relevant. I don't think anyone would object to that. But he's talking about being like the leader in decision making broadly, because women can't do that because men do it better, and that is like a category of people he's putting on a lower step than men.
Okay, you agree there are fundamental differences between men and women, right?
Yeah, but not when it comes to like their ability to manage their lives, the worth of their agency, or anything like that. It would just be like, I mean, their average like strength and size differences, reproductive stuff, minor stuff like that.
Definitely not in regards to their agency, but for example, it's not a really far stretch to say that men, on average, make better leaders than women. That's due to testosterone, due to some brain differences, right? That's not a big stretch. I think there's pretty good data for that.
There isn't though.
Okay, you would disagree with that?
No, yeah, 100%. There's no evidence at all that the brain structure of men and women, respectively, makes men better leaders. But that belief is like a common like, oh well, it's not bigotry, it's science, right? There are social biases towards men in leadership roles, but that's not really like an affirmation of the difference, right? I mean, there were social biases between white and black people in Jim Crow era America. Like that's kind of leading on the scales a little bit.
But you don't think massive differences in testosterone will play a role in how assertive you are in a workspace?
I don't, in terms of how assertive you are, like this is very socially determined. When women are assertive, they get called bitches, and when guys are assertive, they get called go-getters. So there's kind of like a socially discouraging factor. And even then, like assertiveness isn't always a good thing, right? Like lots of guys are so assertive that they're like machismo-laden dumbasses who get themselves in trouble 24/7 because they can't like restrain their ego. Oftentimes, like really effective leaders are kind of like patient, quiet, socially oriented. How can you say women are better at social stuff but men are better leaders? Like, isn't that a contradiction?
Not necessarily. Being a leader is a very, very specific type of social things, right? It's a very specific and distinct type. There's many other types of social things. I think this is where you and I are going to disagree on. This is a whole new can of worms. You're going to say, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason why that like 98% of Fortune 500 CEOs are men is because of social factors and because of biases in the workplace. I'm going to say it's partially because of that, but partially also because of biological factors. Am I assuming your position correctly?
You're correct. Yeah, I think it's overwhelmingly social influences
Right.
rather than biological ones.
Right, and I'm gonna say it's closer to like split down the middle, but that's a whole can of worms that I think we can debate for hours and hours on it.
The problem is that there's just no scientific evidence for the claim that it is. Because usually this is how it happens. This is like the problem with Evo Psych, right? You'll have a social bias. Some group of people are treated worse than the other, and people will say, oh well, that's not unfair, one group is just naturally different / worse than the other. What's the evidence for this? Well, no, and then they like come up with some explanation. Then social circumstances change and that gap like sort of closes, and then like it was just like cope, right? um Back in the 50s, the Irish had like a much lower average IQ than the English, but now it's completely caught up. But back then they thought it was because the Irish were just genetically inferior.
Yeah, I mean, again, like this is like there. I don't want to open up this rabbit hole, but I'll quickly address what you said. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. There are fundamental differences between a man and a woman grade. Female has greater volume in prefrontal cortex, subprefrontal cortex, superior temporal cortex, lateral, blah, blah, blah. Males on average has greater volume in ventral, blah, blah, blah. So there are fundamental differences, and you can just go through studies for days and days. There are fundamental differences between a man's brain and a woman's brain. Now, look, no one's going to give you a clear-cut answer how those differences in the man's and woman's brains are going to manifest in terms of their, let's just say, ability to climb the work hierarchy, right? That's going to be more of a theorizing type of thing. But there are, to say that there's like no differences between a man's and woman's brain is fundamentally not true. Like all the science supports that, yes, there are. They've studied this to death. There are fundamental differences between a man's brain and a woman's brain. But yeah, that's, I think, again, a whole different
I know there
discussion.
are differences, but the question is, to what extent can those differences be determined to be like causatively affecting social outcomes? We know there are differences in size and brain matter and stuff on average, but like there are no like leadership genes. The question is, now that we know those differences exist, what do they affect? There are, of course, differences that do affect stuff. Obviously, due to the hormone washes that men and women tend to be subjected to, there are differences in a lot of stuff having to do with reproduction, for example. They say like pain tolerance for women is higher. Women, estrogen makes you more emotional, so women are probably more likely to cry. But testosterone also makes you more emotional. People don't talk about that because like people even have jokes about like roid monkeys, like gym bros who like get doped up on roids and then get super angry and they're emotional and shit. But nobody says like testosterone makes you emotional. You know, they say it
Let
makes you
me
like strong, because like emotional is the dirty word they use for women with their hormone, you know.
Let me just quickly address the testosterone thing. This is actually something I know a lot about because I take testosterone replacement therapy. I've thoroughly researched testosterone to the T. So you're partially correct. Testosterone does make you more emotional if you go to super physiological levels. But let's say you're a man who has low testosterone and you get on TRT and you get into like the optimal range, you actually become a lot more calm and grounded. That's exactly what happened to me. So I was having these mood swings when I had low testosterone, got on TRT, right? And when I got to the optimal range, I felt more calm and grounded, less emotional. Now, when I try to play around with it and go a little bit too high, yes, I did experience that, when you go too high. But it's with testosterone, if you're in that optimal range, that actually makes you calm and grounded. It's only when you go too high that you become emotional. But that's a little bit of a side point. But it's
Yeah,
not
because
that like more testosterone makes you more emotional. That's incorrect.
well, you're trying to like balance out within the physiology you have, but on average, testosterone does contribute to higher like degrees of violence or anger. So, for example, it's not a coincidence that men are responsible for like 90% of violent crime, like everywhere, and a lot of that is a product of like crimes of passion, like impulse control stuff. So like in terms of like people say like women are more emotional, women cry more often, sure, but guys are more likely to snap and kill you. So in
Sure,
terms of
we
like
agree on that.
yeah, so yeah, it's the way this stuff gets like framed, you know what I mean? Like women are more emotional, so they can't be as good of leaders, but guys, well, it's like they're take charge, and them being angry is actually like in service of that. It's all these weird like linguistic tricks we play to justify the biases we have.
Yeah, I mean, like you and I can go through studies for days and try to get to the bottom of how much of a role like the testosterone brain differences make in leadership. I think that's we're getting off topic on the debate, so I want to bring it back to the. That could be an interesting discussion we'd have another time. But I want to get back on track with the Andrew Tate thing. So we're talking about. You said that it doesn't necessarily need to be hatred; it can be just the fact that you're subhumanizing someone, correct? And that would be enough for you. So I don't need to. So basically, even if there is no hatred, if Andrew Tate is subhumanizing women, you're okay with that being the reason to get him kicked off.
Yeah, because once you've deemed a group of people to be subhuman, you can do or say basically anything with them. You've basically designated them like a legitimate victim of any political claims that you want to make about them. Which is why like usually guys in the Tate sphere, like it's not long before you see people talking about like outlawing adultery, or like there are a lot of people who don't think women should have had the right to vote, like they think it was a mistake. Stuff like that. Like it always goes downstream once you designate a group of people to be subhuman. I mean, that's what people have always thought about women in patriarchal societies, right? Like they love women. I mean, of course they love women. Like they love f***ing them, you know. They're pretty, they're nice to be around, but like they're still like kind of dogs that need to be let around, you know. And like we have thousands of years of oppression of women to show for like where that attitude leads, you know. Islamic extremists love that line, by the way. Like the whole like, we love women, that's why we seek to protect them by covering them up so that their beauty is preserved, you know?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Islamic fundamentalists are a pretty bizarre group of people. But right now, we got to acknowledge there's some speculation going on your side because Andrew Tate has never directly said women are subhuman. And if he did, correct me if I'm wrong. So we are trying to figure out, based on the other things he said, how he views women. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's not even if he hadn't said, I mean, he's literally said like you have to train women like dogs, and said women are like dogs a lot, I think. And I think he's compared like your girlfriend to property. I mean, I think he's been like I didn't like load up like dozens of examples of whatever, but
Mhm.
he's got a lot of content out there, and I'm pretty sure he ran through this like pretty often too. But like the attitude that he procured with his audience is pretty straightforward. Whatever language he used specifically, the derision and disregard for women was like a consistent product of his content.
What's the evidence for that?
His, I mean, I'm not entirely sure how to substantiate this, but like his audience is like full of the worst humans on earth. They hate women. They fear women because women don't call them back. So it's like an insecurity thing, you know? Because that's like the bulk of where the attention gets, right? Like you hear an Andrew Tate fan, they're not my age and they're not your age. They're like high school kids, you know, sometimes middle school. And they're afraid and insecure of women because they're just hitting puberty. They're nervous. You know, and they know like women are kind of like the gatekeepers of sex, which socially to an extent they are, especially when you're young. Um, and they're looking for answers. And then you've got Andrew Tate, who's using his like drop shipping crypto business to get a bunch of people to spam clips of him on social media. And they see this guy who's like yoked, um, talk about how like women are like dogs that need to be trained properly, you know. And this like really fucks with these kids, you know. A lot of them, like massively so. It's like a social harm.
But wait, go
Spreads.
ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, not at all. I was rambling for a bit.
Okay, but I would say, what's the evidence that Andrew Tate fans fear and hate women? Because I have friends who are Andrew Tate fans, and I can tell you for a fact that none of them hate women. So, do you have like some kind of anecdotal evidence, or you have like what is your evidence for that claim? Because that is a pretty big claim.
Well, we're
Like
making
I could easily make that claim. Vaush's fans hate white men, right? But I have no proof for it, right? Like, so what's the evidence?
well, we're making the problem is here is that there's no way to compile evidence that you would be satisfied with. We're making claims about people's like mental states, right? So if you collect 5 anecdotes from a population of millions, you can form any opinion that you want. With Andrew Tate fans, there were literally millions of fans. I could cultivate like a ton of stuff if I was given the time to, but it would always not be a representative sample. You would have to use like longitudinal studies to like assess the predominance of some attitudes developed over time in some spaces before and after Andrew Tate. Obviously, I don't have my hands in this research right now. All I know is that Andrew Tate absolutely compared women to dogs, claimed that he was a misogynist, women needed to be controlled. He would make, at the very least, callous comments about rape and consent, you know, and that his, you know, content was enjoyed by an audience of millions, which I think you and I can agree definitely had a younger disposition and a very male
Sure,
disposition. Um,
sure. So do a lot of content creators. Mine, for example, I have primarily most of my audience is male. I would probably say that most of your audience is male too. Is that correct?
yeah, for the most part, the
Yeah.
politics
No.
game is a little bit
Right, but this
slanted there.
doesn't mean that your and I audience hates women. But I would say, don't you think it's important to actually gather this evidence before we rush to condemn the guy? Like, I understand that it can be difficult to get this evidence, but don't you think it's a little unfair to jump to this massive conclusion that his audience predominantly fears and hates women before making a statement like that? Like, I would say that's very irresponsible to say that if you don't have the evidence.
No, not even remotely. He's not very subtle about the stuff that he says. Like again, comparing women to dogs, dehumanizing them, bragging about being a misogynist, saying that he moved out to Romania because they have less cucked attitudes towards consent and rape and stuff like that. Like you can pile on, and if somebody was dedicated enough, they could probably compile like hours of footage of him saying stuff like this. And I've interacted with Andrew Tate fans, and they are incredibly misogynistic. But like I don't know what I'd present you then. Like recordings of that, would 1 or 5 or 10 be enough? Because his audience was huge, right? You would need for a representative sample, you would need an enormous number of people. I think to be honest, like the fact that he would brag about being misogynistic and comparing women to dogs and stuff is sufficient to indicate that misogyny was a core component of his content, and therefore that people who watched him enjoyed the misogyny. I mean, if he's bragging about being a misogynist and comparing women to dogs, and his audience is consuming that content, I think it's reasonable to assume from that that they like that part of the content and that it's reflective, at least in part, of their positions.
The comparing to women to dogs thing, you already know how I'm going to respond to that. I'm going to say that that was a joke. That's my interpretation. Maybe your interpretation that he was serious. My interpretation, and this is after actually interacting with the guy personally and kind of understanding his sense of humor, is that that was kind of a bad attempt at humor. Pretty inappropriate, but yeah, he was definitely not being serious. Again, you can interpret it differently. But I just think that the claim that his audience predominantly like hates women is a very, very extreme claim, and it seems to be based on a series of assumptions. Like, okay, like if you want to say that I think that Andrew Tate hates women, you might have a better case for that because you can pull up quotes that he says. But then you want to go one step further and say, furthermore, I think his audience hates women. That is a really big claim. And like, yeah, I understand it's hard to gather evidence, but a little bit is better than nothing. Like right now, you're sitting at zero evidence for that claim.
Wait, I'm sorry. What is the evidence like provided? I need to provide a study that doesn't exist on this. I've interacted with Andrew Tate fans. They
Okay,
are
so you do
there
have some
for
evidence.
well, they're
It's
there for
anecdotal. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't really think anecdotal evidence is worth much. I mean, I could just lie to you directly, but
Well, it's better
every
than nothing, right?
every Andrew Tate fan I have ever interacted with, on or off stream, in any context, in any capacity, seems to have liked Tate for the misogyny that was his brand. I guess this seems kind of odd to me. If there's like a neo-Nazi YouTuber and they're like openly a neo-Nazi, I think it's safe to say like, oh, their audience is neo-Nazis. Not all of them. You know, there are people who hate watch, people who aren't really on board with the ideas. I get that. You know, you can't generalize all those people concretely. But the audience is defined by the positions they enjoy in the person they're watching. And in Tate's case, you know, it seems to be largely young, insecure men who are terrified of women and hate them because they're being taught that feminism has made society anti-masculine and has made women, well, hypergamous, you know, so they'll withhold pussy and go sleep with the alpha or whatever, which means that they're like contributing to societal decline, and they're all like gold diggers and so on and so on, and that makes them hate them. Like the insecurity drives the forces that make them hate.
The Nazi analogy would apply, for example, if Tate's content was just completely focused on women, right? But Tate's content was pretty multidimensional. He talked a lot about fitness. He talked a lot about mental toughness. He talked a lot about finances. He talked a lot about traveling. He talked a lot about politics. He talked about a whole bunch of things, right? It wasn't one dimensional. Furthermore, I am not absolutely not convinced that he is the part of his content, the small part of his content, or let's say the moderate amount of his content that was in regards to women was hateful towards women. My interpretation, that of a lot of people I know, that it was just kind of outdated, and he just thought women need to be protected from themselves, right? But he viewed relationships differently than I do. But I didn't see any hatred in that.
Well, what'd you say about a person who has an outdated opinion on racial politics, right? Depending on how outdated those opinions are, you know, you can run back into hatred pretty quick. He talked
You
about
can, but you
women a
go ahead.
lot. I'm just saying, like, he talked about women a lot. And when he talked about stuff that wasn't women, it was usually in service of gender politics, which were still oriented around male supremacy. The fitness stuff was about achieving like masculinity and manhood, which was about increasing the likelihood of you getting mad pussy. Travel was often about flaunting his wealth. And the wealth and finances talk, I mean, he is literally a scam artist who runs a pyramid scheme. It is literally a pyramid scheme. I think something like 48% commission for every extra person you sign up. So the parts of his like business that weren't misogyny seem to be grifting, which I guess maybe that's better than the open misogyny. I don't really know though.
So the pyramid scheme thing, I'm writing down because I do want to revisit that. But going back to, sorry, what did you say before the pyramid scheme stuff?
Oh, just that a lot of the stuff that he did, you know, like being the best man you can be in his case, like oftentimes it was just like a sort of a frame within the gender politics, an effort to sort of cultivate self in a way that complements the attitudes that he has towards women.
Okay, Vaush, do you think you can hate feminism without hating a woman?
Um, Only by being really misguided. I think that you'd have to have a very poor understanding of what feminism is. But feminism is the ideology of women's liberation. So again, when we say hate, like I don't know if hate's the right word here, because a lot of like really misogynistic rapists don't think they hate women, you know. They think women are beautiful, delicate flowers who are just kind of dumb and need to be led around by a guy. And if they say no, they mean yes. Like hate might not be the right word. It's just bad.
Okay.
It's a, you know, bad attitude. But yeah, no, I think that, you know, feminism being the women's lib ideology is kind of necessary.
Would you say that there's some parts of feminism potentially that have gone a little too far and have been nasty?
Um, no, I mean, any social movement is going to like create people who are obnoxious and have ideas that sort of work within the dialectic,
Like
to sort of
women
be
saying
resolved.
all men are pigs, all men are trash. Like you would not be in favor of that, would you?
No, I think it's really dumb when they do that. I don't think it
Okay.
causes like a big social problem. A lot of those women go home at the end of the day and get like railed by dudes. So you know, clearly it's not affecting
Sure.
their.
That we agree on. Yes, I do agree with you. The hypocrisy of extreme feminists. Sure. But okay. So if you believe that feminism, your view on feminism is that it's this thing where it's become about taking power from men. It's about shaming and hating on men. If that's, regardless of whether it's true or not, if that's what your view of feminism is, and you don't like that idea, why can't you still at the same time be like, well, I like women, I just don't like this idea? That because even if it's true or not, I think that's what feminism is.
Like I said, I think you'd have to be misguided because I do think that's a misguided attitude towards what towards what feminism is. But this has always been like the attitude, right? Like as far back as women liberation exists, you can go to like Wollstonecraft or whatever, or even farther back. I mean, you can go to like what we might call like proto-feminists in the Islamic age, the Islamic golden age. You know, the attitude towards women has never been one of explicit hatred. It's always been of the paternalism. It's always been like women don't know what's best for them, therefore it's our job to sort of lead them around by the nose. And feminism looks to correct that, even if there are sort of bad excesses from at times, which has been the case with I think all ideological developments. I still think overall it's a good thing to believe in.
Okay, let's just say it's misguided, but being misguided is very different from being, let's just say, dehumanizing or hateful, right?
I mean, it depends. If a person genuinely believes that there's an international Jewish conspiracy to destroy the white race by promoting the immigration of brown and black people, if they, you know, if they were to act on that sincere belief, they would be a neo-Nazi, or at least they'd certainly be something close to one. But I think it would be fair to call that person hateful, even if the hate is motivated by sincere, not delusion, a sincere misconception.
Okay, let's just assume a set of premises. Let's assume that Andrew Tate believes feminism is this nasty thing that's about hating and putting men down, right? Let's just assume that premise is true. And he doesn't like that idea. And he communicates that to his audience. And his audience also doesn't like the idea of a bunch of women putting men and putting a bunch of men down, right? And so their belief is that, hey, this isn't good for society. We shouldn't be putting men down. I don't want to be shamed for being a man. So I don't like this idea. What am I going to do about it? Well, I'm probably just going to say feminism sucks. So yeah, maybe I am misguided, but this belief isn't going to lead to these guys going out there and like attacking women or something like that. This is just like, okay, I think this thing sucks. You can argue that it's been misrepresented and these guys are misguided, but I think you'd have a really hard time going further than that.
Well, he also bragged about being a misogynist and how women are dogs. So it seems like his dislike for feminism was motivated more by it being a women's liberation movement and less by, you know, any kind of like misconceived understanding of what it is. He literally believes women are lesser people. Of course, he would like take issue with their liberation movement, right? But even then, like the idea that these people don't go out and hurt people, yeah, they do. They rape people. Andrew Tate's like the stuff that he said about consent, like the yeah, like no means yes, or like, you know, you choke her, you slap her out or whatever. I've certainly never seen the guy like explain to his audience of young impressionable men like what affirmative consent is, you know? Like rape happens. It happens a lot. And oftentimes the rapist doesn't even know they're doing it because they have a really stupid idea of what consent is. So like the harm does exist. It does go out there, you know?
Theoretical harm, sure, but like again, we're going to be at a standstill on this because I'm going to say, and again, I'm doing this in good faith, is that the misogynist, him saying I'm misogynist, him saying women are dogs, is his attempt at humor, right?
But it's not contradicted with any like counterpoint, right? Look, so like I make jokes about like saying, haha, I hate women and misogynist because I make like edgy jokes, whatever. But like I've done like political theses on the importance of feminism and women's liberation. Like you can tell it's a joke because it's contrasted against the extensive positions that I've laid out. But you say he's joking when he says like women are dogs, women are like lesser, you know, like I'm a misogynist, haha. But there's nothing contrasting that. There's no like, actually, I do believe in women's liberation. I do think they're equal to us, you know.
Well, I would say there's a big thing is the fact that he funded a women's shelter in Romania.
Well, that's good, I admit, but I don't think that takes away from his political positions.
Right, but there are things that he does that do go against basically the joke that he makes, right? Like you have made quite edgy jokes in your career. I have as well, right? That doesn't mean we believe those things.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that I don't think the idea that like essentially an act of charity negates your ideology, right? It's like the billionaires who will like toss like some millions to some social cause and then spend the rest of their life making that cause worse. But that doesn't take away from like the ideology or whatever. You know, and the ideology has been consistent, you know. If it was a joke, like the thing that I would need to believe that he was joking, in spite of how consistent he was with all that, was he would need to have like a consistent and principled like feminist advocacy for women's equality as like the main line for the content, and the jokes are like the exception to it, and it's funny because they're contrasted against the actual stuff he believes.
Sure, I could say he could have outlined his true non-sarcastic positions better. I think he actually post YouTube ban has actually said that himself, that he could have lined out his positions better. He could have been smarter in the way he words things. Again, I think you and I are not gonna, because your opinion is that the stuff he's saying wasn't a joke. My opinion is that it was a joke. It's kind of open to interpretation. I was just making the point when you said there's nothing that goes against, there's no like conflicting evidence. I was saying, well, there's the fact that he funds a women's shelter, right? So there are some things. There's also, for example, I think that if Andrew Tate was, let's just say, malicious towards women or hurt women or even like, belligerent towards women anyway, there would be women coming forward and making allegations, right? He's clearly slept with hundreds of girls, right? There's never once been an allegation made against him, right? At least not that I've seen. I've done a good amount of research. So I think that's also another piece of evidence.
I mean, a couple of points. There has been an investigation. I think there have been accusations against him, if I'm not wrong. But even then, I don't think it's necessary that any of those exist. I'm only concerned with his public platform. I don't think a person's YouTube channel should be deleted because they're a rapist off platform. Like that doesn't really manifest in the channel. It's if he's like, projecting those political positions.
Well, we're trying to establish on whether he means that stuff or it's a joke, right?
What matters to me is the effect it has on the audience. And having talked to a decent number of Andrew Tate fans, if those fuckers were joking, they sure were consistent in their jokes, almost unrelenting even. Because I never got like they're all anti-feminist. They all think that women are lesser and need to be controlled by men. There's no there's no ambiguity in what they believe. It's incredibly consistent. Like from Tate to the people who I've talked to and seen who like him. It's very, very, very consistent. I don't think there's like a veil of irony that cloaks any of this.
Okay, so first I just want to very quickly address the real life stuff, the allegations. So there's two things that happened in his career, as far as I know. First was in England. One of the girls that worked for his camp thing, she wanted money from him. He didn't want to give her money. She wanted basically a bribe. She threatened to go to the police. I don't know if she actually went to the police or not. I think she did. The police dropped the investigation. There was no charges pressed. There was nothing. The whole thing was basically like a joke. So there's never any kind of charges filed, and certainly he wasn't convicted of anything. In Romania, as far as I understand, and I have researched the story pretty closely, there was one girl who was at one of his parties. Her boyfriend called her from France. She panicked and said that she was there against her will. The Romanian police came, they investigated, no charges were filed. Certainly there was no conviction, but I think the big thing is there's no charges filed, and he was on the street in like 1 hour. He just had to go down to the police station and make a statement. I think if there was any kind of a case, then at least charges would have been filed and he would have to fight it out in court. Okay, now going back to what you were saying earlier, like, okay, well, it doesn't really matter what happens in his day-to-day life. I care about what he says on the platform. So I kind of want to see where you draw that line. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, I make a joke, and it's a bad joke, and it causes some kind of harm to the public. Should I be deplatformed for that one bad joke because it caused some kind of harm to the public? Or does there need to be like 5 bad jokes, 10 bad jokes? Like, where do you draw that line?
I don't think there's a solid line. There never can be. Even our like legal definitions for the point at which a person can be arrested for a crime are often pretty vague. Like, find a consistent line for the legal definition of harassment, for example, or stalking. It's really difficult to ever find a concrete line. But I don't think we're like anywhere near that line here. He didn't make a couple of jokes. Like, he used his wealth to build a pyramid scheme empire where he paid people to spread clips that got billions of views, where he was consistently and unambiguously misogynistic. Sort of like blaming victims of rape, comparing women to dogs, stuff like that. It wasn't like we're not talking like degrees of ambiguity here. Like the reason the ban hammer came down on him when there were so many misogynists on YouTube is because he got so bad, so big, so quickly. He essentially became like a social harm. I think it was like morally necessary to deplatform him. And I'm glad they did. I'm glad that he angered the normies to the point where he got nuked.
Yeah, on that we fundamentally disagree on. Okay, so since you're bringing up the pyramid scheme, let's just address this. So I could give you my explanation, but Spencer Cornelia has a really good video on this. Who's someone who I personally trust. He's very objective, and he's not a big like Andrew Tate fan. So
what's his name?
Spencer Cornelia. Are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not.
He's a pretty popular content creator. I think he's extremely objective, and I was actually surprised to see the video. But let me just bring up this video because he's going to explain a lot better than I can, and we'll take like a few minutes, and then we can kind of address this. So 1 second. I would have kind of written this up. I just didn't know we were going to get into like the pyramid scheme stuff. Okay.
I don't know if we can kick for the full 16 minutes.
No, we're not. Can you hear? Can you hear it? I just
unfortunately I can't. Only your mic is keyed in.
Okay, let me.
If you want, though, I can run through the video myself and look at the I can look at the closed captioning.
Okay.
To see it really quickly. Is Andrew Tate running a pyramid scheme here? 1 second.
Right. Let me try to do that myself.
I see the video right here. Okay. Cool. Right here, show transcript. Okay.
How do you see the transcript?
There are 3 dots on the right side that you can click on. It says show transcript, and you can skim through it really quickly.
3 dots. Oh, right. I see it. Okay, cool. Let me do that too.
All right, the Hustler University. Zooming.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think around 206, 208 is when it gets interesting.
Let me see. Must be paid for the product, recruit business, and customer opportunities refers to downside. First, legal evidence of marketing and the products commission. Mark back sample, indicating there are multiple levels of being involved. It's just affiliate marketing, which is not legal. You believe it's just saying they're rich, they refuse to join. Okay, so he's saying it doesn't meet the legal definition for pyramid scheme because it's effectively just affiliate marketing.
He's exactly. He's saying there's no multiple levels. It's just affiliate marketing, no different than pretty much what every YouTuber does.
Yeah, I mean that if you sort of draw that out, that does become a pyramid because all the people beneath you will still try to benefit from affiliate marketing themselves.
No, but what he's saying is there's no like pyramid means there's multiple levels, right? He's just saying there's not multiple levels. It's just literally like, okay, I have a product, like I have the Ultimate Dating Blueprint 2.0. You decide, hey Alex, I love your product. I'm like, hey, cool, Vaush, here's a link, and if you get one person sign up, you get 10% of that. That's your affiliate link, right? That's not me having a pyramid scheme. That's just me having affiliate. What he's saying, that's exactly what Tate is doing.
Apparently, the affiliate program that he has been shut down. Hustle University affiliate program
he shut it down when he started facing all the public scrutiny or whatever. But it doesn't mean that he was running a pyramid scheme. I mean, this was investigated pretty thoroughly. There's just one level, it's just affiliate. There's no pyramid. But that was a common talking point.
I know pyramid schemes like fly under the law like all the time. But the shape of that is still the reason I'm like pointing out that it's so in addition to the Hustle University thing being a scam on its own, which that's a whole that's a whole thing. I don't even care that much about it. There are plenty of scammers all over the place online. The problem is that he was using the pyramid scheme affiliate marketing thing as a way of distributing the clips that he had produced everywhere in a way that like can't really be dealt with without some like massive multi-social media platform crackdown. Which I think was pretty necessary in this case.
Have you gone through Hustlers University yourself?
Yeah, I looked through it on stream. It was pretty hilarious.
What did you think was like a scam about it?
Everything about like it as a general rule to any people who are watching, if there's like some wealthy guy who's like telling you that you can be like him as he poses with a Bugatti or like shoots a gun or like does like LARPy training exercises when you know for a fact that he has absolutely no combat training or anything like that. What he's trying to do is sell you an image of masculinity. And not only is it fake, because you can construct anything with wealth, literally anything, but like you can't have that. The thing that he's selling you is the money itself that he possesses. You can get all the like lessons online you want in like drop shipping, like training or like crypto investment or whatever. Most people who go through this end up broke. There's literally like a warpath through the internet, like from the .com boom all the way up to now, of people with these crazy ideas on how to get rich fast, and this is just like a continuation of that.
I get there's a lot of scams on the internet, but what about specifically about Hustlers University did you think was a scam? Like, what were the promises that were made that weren't true? Like, because as far as I understand the course, there was a section about drop shipping, there was crypto, all things that people have made money on. Right? I don't think anything about that is a scam.
People have made money on crypto, but not most people who get into crypto. A small number of very wealthy people, usually people who already had a lot of money, made money on crypto, in addition to a collection of early investors. We've had like a giant crypto crash recently. Like obviously any advice on investing in crypto, right? Like in the past couple of months, it would have just led to a bunch of people losing their money. I mean, it's a pump and dump scheme, right? And the
Okay,
drop
Vaush,
shipping thing,
sorry,
like
go ahead.
if making money online was that easy, like more people would do it to the point where you reach market equilibrium, and then it would no longer be profitable to get into. There's not like a hidden market like anywhere. It's not like the gold rush days anymore, right? Like there are no like cheat codes or whatever. Most people who get really wealthy really quick are really lucky. You know, that's the secret.
All right, Vosh, would you say a professional poker player who writes a book about how to be good at poker is a scammer?
No, if they provide tips on how to be good at poker, which is a skill-based
Well,
game, of course.
well,
That's I
there's
think
luck.
sure there is. There's luck in
But
everything,
there's a lot of people who play poker and lose a lot of money.
of course. But
Right.
people understand that poker is a competitive game with luck elements. The problem is that people have no clue what they're getting into when they're like paying an online course to get drop shipping and crypto investment advice. First of all, if you're getting crypto investment advice from anybody, you should immediately like never listen to them again. Nobody has crypto advice that's good unless it says don't invest. Um, because odds are it will not end up in your favor. Like that's the good advice, but I'll give that for free. And as for the drop shipping stuff, like this is pretty standard stuff, right? Like he's using the image of like wealthy masculinity to sell a product. He's gotten really, really wealthy off gullible people. I just think it's kind of like morally wrong. It's not always illegal, right? Like, this stuff isn't necessarily.
So we have a little bit of common ground. I agree with you. There's nothing like magical in his course that's groundbreaking. But then again, he's only charging $50 a month for it. So I probably wouldn't expect a course that I pay $50 a month for to give me some kind of like magical information. But you would agree that a lot of people who pick up poker books are like, oh, poker is awesome, right? There was this big poker boom about 10 years ago, right? Oh, I'm going to make a lot of money playing online poker. Most of those people don't make a lot of money. They make either no money or they lose some money. Like you would agree with that, right?
Let me put it this way. If there was a poker player who had a website where they were like in a Bugatti or a private plane and they were like, you can have this. And then it's like for $50 a month, the poker tips that'll get you loaded. Here's like 50 people who have gotten really wealthy. Don't look at the 200 who haven't, And then they did that. It's like, here's $50 a month. I would say that's equally unethical. It's not just about the information that you're providing. It's also about the way you're providing it and the expectations you're setting. And the subscription model too, right? Like that's because the shit they do behind the scenes is disgusting, right? It's never just like, oh, here's the product. Here's what you get. There's this constant like, this is the problem with advice, right? Like Dan said, it's something that can only be evaluated in retrospect. You never know how valuable the advice you're getting is until after you've already paid for it, always. So you get into this like month by month scheme and you're, every day, next month I'm going to give you the course that'll really teach you to grind down on drop shipping, or whatever. And it's like these tactics exist in other types of media, like gotcha games. They prey on weak-minded people who have a dream of something, like a social attainment or wealth or power, and it strips them of everything they have. And Tate becomes a multimillionaire, and a lot of people just sort of fall in the cracks.
Okay, but just because there's some over-the-top marketing doesn't mean the product itself is a scam, right?
Well, I think the marketing the marketing determines whether or not it's a scam, right? Because if you're honest about a bad product, it's not a scam. If the marketing's consistent with the product, it can't really be a scam by definition.
Oh, but then 99% of the internet is a scam. Everyone does over the top marketing. Like everyone, probably with the exception of me, potentially. Like literally, literally every single person, any industry, fitness, health, supplements,
oh yeah,
lifestyle.
oh yeah,
does over the top marketing. Everyone's promising more than they can give. Like that's so. Then, according to this definition, like pretty much everyone's running a scam.
Yeah, I wish the FDA would really crack down on supplement testing, so that all the people like Alex Jones who are making millions of dollars selling like 2 cents of zinc for $65 could get like the book thrown at them. I think that'd be great personally. It's just truth in advertising stuff. Back in the 20th century, we like labor unions fought for consumer rights when it came to like labeling on packaging, or like what corporations had to disclose, or like how transparent they had to be. And I think it's truth in advertising. I think it's good to sort of expand that as broadly as possible. But Tate, I think, and a lot of other people who will do this, here's crypto advice for $50 a month bullshit. Like it's worse, I think, with them. They take it farther than the average average guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if your definition of a scam is someone who has over the top marketing or branding, then yeah, probably sure you can make
not just
that
over the top. Everything's over the top. Japanese commercials on Pocky are over the top, right?
Right.
This is like deliberate, protracted manipulation of people's weakest instincts,
I
selling
mean, do
them
you
a
think
fake dream.
Coca-Cola or fast food restaurants or any of those big companies do anything differently?
Yeah, I because if you want to buy a Coca-Cola, it's like here's $1 that you pay once. Here's a bottle with Coke in it. With Andrew Tate, it's the secrets of wealth can be yours, but they're gated behind a monthly subscription and this social club. And as is often the case with these pyramid schemes or whatever, if you join up and things don't go well for you, it's your fault, right? Like, oh, you're drop shipping, your crypto investment's not making you money. Well, that's because you didn't do it right. So it creates this feedback loop where like wealth is drained from people with like no reprise. Like it's like like they get fucked by this, right? Like it's a real like cult mentality victim thing, you know? But Coca-Cola also like pays for death squads to kill striking workers in the in Latin America. So you know, whatever.
Okay, well, let's take a gym. They have photos of like really sexy people looking jacked, and probably most of those models are taking steroids. The gym knows that most people are never going to look that good just from going to their gym, right? So, what is their goal? Well, their goal is to get people to basically look at that photo, be like, "Oh, I want to look like this guy," or "I want to get that girl." Sign up for that monthly membership. After 2 months, they stop going to the gym and they collect monthly membership. I don't see how this is any different than the gym.
Well, I
Like the
think gym
gym,
memberships are crazy exploitative. I've tried to cancel gym memberships multiple times because I have a home gym now, and like it's like, oh, can you come in person to cancel it? The fuck do
okay,
you? What the do
yeah,
you mean come
that
in
is
person with a
that's
gun?
super annoying. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
You want me to come in
That
with a
is super
gun?
annoying.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I've had that happen at LA Fitness too. Yeah, man, it's like super annoying. I just called my credit card company and just had them cancel it
yeah,
and
like
charge
so
me.
no, gyms are pretty but to a lesser extent, I think, because the broader like the thing that they're offering is upfront and available. You can go to a gym, you see the machines, the pool, the locker room, you know what you're getting with the membership. Whereas the purpose of a subscription model with something like Andrew Tate's thing is this interminable like gatekeep behind info and social access that you have to continue paying into, not just to continue benefiting from it, but also to like get the next secret. It's not so like you can be in a gym for one day and immediately know, is this worth my consistent monthly payment? This is what it is. It's unambiguous. But advice, again, has to be valued in retrospect, especially financial advice.
But the reason people are joining the gym is to achieve a certain image that is being advertised in the ads. Like in the ads, you never see like some like average fit guy. You see some super jack dude or some super hot chick with big tits, right? It's always so like that image, like 99% of people who are going to the gym, they're not going to get there, right? Because they don't have the discipline, they don't have the willpower. But they could theoretically, potentially, if they have good genetics, look really good if they stick with their workout, right? The gym is just giving you the tools, right? But the gym is, I don't see how this is in any way different than the gym. The gym is giving you over the top marketing to try to get you in the door so they collect your money payments. So I think that if you want to say that, like, okay, well, you know, Andrew Tate's Hustlers University is scam, then you have to say, okay, well, gyms are scam too, because they promise you shit that probably 99% of people aren't going to achieve.
Unrealistic promises are just a part of advertising, but the difference with a gym is that you can always assess exactly what it is you're getting. If gyms had like progressive tiers of membership where the longer you stay, you unlock extra secrets that they claim will definitely boost your muscle growth by this amount, and then they're like giving you like hokey like bullshit. And by the way, considering the fact that Tate's encouraging crypto investment, he's actively encouraging people to drop their money into a toilet. So like the gym, you know how much you're paying. It's the monthly membership per month. Whereas with like this drop shipping, which you have to invest in, or crypto, which you have to invest in, you're paying money for uncertain info that changes, contextualized based on stuff that you can't predict, and the info is on stuff that's usually bad financial advice that will then cause you to lose more money overwhelmingly. I don't think they're comparable at all. Oh.
Okay, I think we would disagree on that. I mean, I would say that it is up to you at that point as an adult to decide if you want to get involved in crypto, if you want to get involved in drop shipping. Now, the crypto crash happened way after Hustlers University came out. I think if he was writing his course now, he probably wouldn't put crypto in there. But to be fair, at that time, before the crypto crash, every single person literally that I knew who had a lot of money was investing in crypto. Like, I mean, crypto was the hot thing. So back when the course was created,
That's not a good
crypto
argument,
was
though, for financial
crypto
advice.
was right, but there's been a lot of financial advice that used to be good wisdom that turned out to be bad wisdom,
But
right? Like that's just happened throughout the course of like decades. Like, oh yeah, like invest in you know, this and this and this. Bam, that thing crashed. Oh, you know, .com. Yeah, they're not going to go. Bam, that crashes.
and they've
Oh,
all been
stocks are sick.
scams. Like, you're describing the
But
history of people getting scammed.
stocks aren't scams. They just turn out to be a bad investment.
People telling you to. So first of all, there's a difference between stocks and crypto investments, because stocks are reflected by the performance of a company, and crypto is purely speculative, in which the only value assigned to crypto is more people buying into it, which means that it's by definition a pump and dump. You can like invest in crypto, and if more people buy in, your crypto gets worth more. But at the end of the day, to cash that money out, which you will eventually want to do because crypto isn't a currency, it's a speculative investment, you have to pull out, and that lowers the value of the coin for everyone. And if everyone does that, the coin is worth nothing. That's the difference between crypto and like regular money, right? If everyone withdraws money from a bank at once, that money is still worth the same amount. Even if the bank has trouble, if you get your $100, it's worth $100. But if everyone sells crypto at once, you might sell like 2 Bitcoins and have it be worth 0.08 Bitcoins by the time you actually get your transaction paid out.
Okay. Again, I want to avoid going down a rabbit hole. I do disagree with you that crypto is purely speculative. I think it is definitely a big part of it is speculative. It also has some practical, tangible uses. There's a whole bunch of reasons why people prefer crypto over any other type of money, including the fact that it can be traced by the government, so you don't have to pay taxes, including the fact that, for example, there's lower processing fees. There's a lot of practical reasons.
They don't have lower processing fees. In order to go through Bitcoin transactions, you have to go through their very limited sort of a rate of processors, and that can cost a lot, like tens or
What's the
hundreds.
percentage on that?
It varies based on the traffic at a time.
Because I'm pretty sure on credit cards, it's like if you're a business, you pay like 3.9 or 4.9 or something like that. It's not cheap. As a consumer, you don't ever see any of that. But if you have a business, you see all of that. That's why a lot of businesses are like cash only. Like, hey, please pay us in cash.
I get that, but like you can potentially pay like a lot of money on a transaction through crypto, depending on the market at the time. You can track people through crypto. It's not too difficult to do. As well. Like the feds are already in on this, so. And I don't want it to be free of taxes. I want crypto to be taxed. That's a negative to me. I want them to be taxed. There are billionaires who are like hoarding wealth through crypto acquisition, and then like using a fraction of their wealth to advertise it so other idiots buy in, and then they like withdraw so that they like make the money. It's a pump and dump scheme, right?
No, I disagree with that. I'm just looking it up, like how much are cryptocurrency exchange fees under 10,000, 0.4%, 10,000 to 50,000, 0.6%. I mean, yeah, that is definitely less than credit card processors.
But it depends. But it depends on, first of all, the percentage can vary based on the amount of electricity used to make that transaction doesn't change that much for the amount you're making. So if you need to buy something that's $3 with crypto, then it doesn't work. Like, because you might have to wait a bit for the transaction to go through, and the fee might cost more than the thing you're actually buying. If you can't use crypto for like day-to-day transactions, it's not a currency. If you have to go through like big block exchanges beforehand, then that's not different from selling stock. Then it is a speculative asset.
Yeah, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of debating crypto, so let me just weir it back to the Andrew Tate thing. Where were we on that? Let me approach it from a different perspective. Okay, how about this? You're a big time content creator, fairly big, right?
I'd like to hope so.
You make I'm assuming the vast majority of your livelihood from being on YouTube, making content. What if you got deplatformed? That would be the end of your career, or close to the end of your career, right? Like, as a content creator, shouldn't you be very, very concerned about another content creator being deplatformed? Because why can't you be the next one?
I mean, if I made my money as like a Starbucks barista, all you have to do as a Starbucks barista to lose your job is snap at a customer one time. As a content creator, we have more job security than basically any other profession in the history of humanity. We have the job security of like medieval aristocrats. I feel like we overstate like the threat that we face very often. It is something that I'm concerned about, but I'm more concerned with why people get deplatformed than that people get deplatformed. People get fired from jobs all the time, right? Deplatforming is relatively uncommon, certainly relative to the rate at which people get fired from jobs for like petty misbehavior.
It really depends on what side of the aisle you're on. But let's take someone like Destiny getting deplatformed from Twitch. You wouldn't say that Destiny is some woman-hating Nazi. He's a pretty liberal guy who has a generally pretty holistic message. Like, if that can happen to him, why can't it happen to me and you? Certainly can happen to me. I'm probably on some issues more extreme than Destiny.
I've been banned from Twitch twice.
Right.
It has happened to me. Destiny has definitely done some pretty spicy stuff that directly conflicts with Twitch TOS. So I don't know if it's out of the out of left field with him necessarily. But I'm mostly concerned about the logic behind deplatforming. Um, like Andrew Tate was deplatformed because he posed a social harm, a significant one. I think it's okay to ban people for that. But I don't think there's a neutral way of doing that. I want people to be banned for being the wrong things. If a person is like a Nazi or like a super bad misogynist or a racist or whatever, I want them to be banned because it's morally wrong for them to spread those messages. And I'm happy with rules and regulations that deprioritize that kind of content.
Okay, but let's just say hypothetical. What if the politics in the U.S. Swing far to the right, and they see like, look at this liberal white man hating Vaush. He's spewing all this like liberal hatred. He doesn't go along with our agenda. Let's ban him. Like that could easily happen if the coin was flipped.
Sure, and they would do that anyway. But even so, I would just argue against it because I don't think it's moral for them to ban me for being left-leaning. Like this is like saying like you shouldn't arrest people for being murderers because if the murderers ever achieve political power, they'll arrest you for petting puppies in the park, you know?
No, I don't think it's like that. I think it's more about content creators sticking together and really not wanting to see their own get kicked off a platform. Well,
but people do bad things, right? Like I stand with my fellow citizens of America, but if one of them's a murderer, they should be arrested. They're at the end of the day, like when we create rules, they will always be biased in a given set of directions. Like we have laws, it's like, well, right now it's illegal to rape people, but if like super pro rape guys become in power, like, oh, well, now who's in charge now? Like, yeah, people who have power, but I'll argue for the responsible use of that power as long as I'm capable of doing so. And I think that Andrew Tate being like a bad guy, I think it's okay for him to be deplatformed.
Right, but then again, it just comes down to who decides that he's a bad guy. You think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad guy, right? The tech oligarchs think he's a bad guy, or at least they did in this instance, right? Or whatever reasons they had, right? But that's so much power that's being made by such few people. And just to me, it's like as a content creator, like I don't want that power to be in the hands of very few people because very well I realize the tide could go the other way. It could sweep against me.
Well, how do you think laws are made? The laws that we have against rape derive from British common law, which would have literally been written by aristocrats and their pet lawyers. The people who decided that it should be illegal to rape were acting out of more consolidated power than any, like, tech oligarchs are today. Should we then be mad whenever a rapist is arrested because the source of their arrest was a rule created by an unequal world?
But what terms of service did Andrew Tate break? That's like the answer that no one can ever give.
No, the YouTube terms of service on hateful content, he basically like lit with a torch. Like he basically like torched it. But I'm not making an argument for like proceduralist TOS following. I'm saying like morally, I think it's okay, even if I have a problem with the system we live in. Like I'm an anarchist. I don't like laws in the sense that they're constructed today. But if a rapist gets arrested,
okay, that's another thing we can debate at a later date.
Yeah. Like, but like, so like, I don't like our criminal justice system. I don't like laws as they exist currently. I don't like these institutions. But if a murderer gets arrested, I'm not going to complain about it because I think that it's a just act from an unjust system. I don't like our tech oligarchs, but I do agree with this act, so I have to defend it morally.
I guess it's a different way of looking at it. I look at it completely differently. I look at it more of like, let's just put it like this. I'm a construction worker, right? I work in construction and I have a boss and my boss has all the power. And my boss decides that he doesn't like that the outfit my fellow construction worker is wearing on that day. And he decides to fire him. And like, while I may personally not like that guy, that is very concerning to me because what if my boss decides the following day that he doesn't like the outfit I'm wearing to work and he decides to fire me? That's kind of how I view things. It's like we are sort of like all intertwined as content creators. And to me, it just seems like almost like just like being like a Benedict Arnold in a way. And I'm not making that claim that you are. I'm just saying like in general, when anyone's in favor of content creator being deplatformed, unless their reason is so extreme, like directly promoting violence, like say, hey, let's go and loot this store and kill those people, that could be an exception. But aside from that, which Andrew Tate did not do, he did not incite violence, then I'm like, okay, but like this could happen to any one of us. What if the tide is turned? So I don't want it to happen to any of us.
What if your construction worker coworker was just really misogynistic on the job site and got fired for that?
Well, that depends. I need to know more information. Like, is he saying that shit at work, or he just believes in his like at home? Like what's the context?
Well, we're talking about people acting out their jobs. So in this case, would be him saying he's a misogynist. He thinks women are dogs. You know, he makes jokes about like slapping them around or raping them. You know, he thinks they should make decisions for themselves. He shares these opinions openly. You could get fired from a job for that. I don't necessarily think it would be a solidarity issue, you know? Again, content creators get way more leeway when it comes to misbehavior than like any other group. As a content creator, there are YouTubers who literally have been like nonces and then have gotten back into it. Like Shane Dawson can like just walk back onto YouTube, you know? Content
Wait,
creation.
Shane, what did he do that was so bad? I thought he was like a super liberal, like chill dude. What did he do? I thought he was like he just made documentaries and shit.
He was very, very creepy with like young people and cats. I think it's a whole thing. That's a giant rabbit hole. That's not a rabbit hole. That's like an eldritch pit that you find in the middle of a forest.
Vaush, can I just quickly point out the irony of you talking about another content creator being weird with cats as you pet a cat?
Yeah, right on my lap too, and it's like a creepy hairless cat too. Look at that.
I know that.
Look at her. Pigeon. Look at. Nope. All right. Oh, never mind. You know, I'm just saying, like, content creators, I think, are generally given a lot of lenience. I do worry about like losing my job. You know, like, because I don't control YouTube or Twitch or whatever.
No.
I don't think I do stuff that warrants a ban. You know, I make edgy jokes, but I think that I abide by both the procedural TOS restrictions, and I also do like, I think my content is morally good. I imagine a lot of people think that, you know. But
I'm sure Andrew Tate felt the same thing.
I'm sure, right? But like that's how it always is, right? Like, well, the Nazis thought the Nazis were right, and the Allies thought the Allies were right, and Emperor Hirohito thought that, you know, we should kill 4 million people in Manchuria. You know, like everyone thinks they're right. We have to appeal to a broader set of moral values, and you know, I'm comfortable with the morals that would lead someone to say, yeah, Andrew Tate has to go.
Yeah, there lies the crux of our disagreement. The analogy you gave earlier, I would say a better analogy is my fellow construction worker is like a Mormon or something like that. He has like 5 wives and believes in a lot of weird Mormon shit. Now, personally, I'm not a Mormon. I think having 5 wives is weird as that's just like 5 times the headache that you're going to have. But I don't think he should be fired for having a complete different attitude towards women than me, right? So I think that would be a much better analogy. That's kind of how I view things. Like Andrew Tate has a different attitude towards women than I do. I don't think it's one that he should be punished for, though. That's kind of where we get into the crux of our disagreement.
Well, a Mormon has religious freedom. They couldn't be fired for being Mormon, but if they made women uncomfortable in the workplace by sharing their sexist moral views, then they absolutely could be fired.
Okay.
Right?
Let's phrase it like this. I have a guy. He's not a Mormon, right? But he's just, I don't know. He loves something about having 5 wives. He decides to go to some different country. He gets married, or he has some kind of really weird relationship that is not one that I would personally take up on. But he's not really. I don't see anyone being harmed by him having that relationship, right? So I would not want him to be punished for having a relationship that I personally don't feel like I should have or isn't right for me.
But it would be about their workplace behavior, right? I would never argue Andrew Tate should be deplatformed for stuff he does off platform, given maybe some exceptional circumstances. But it's the stuff he does on platform. If he's working at his job, you know, this hypothetical person with the weird attitude towards this, that, the other, and he's being really misogynistic to other coworkers or towards customers, then I think they could be banned for that. It would be like what they do there, you know? And if Tate was privately misogynistic but publicly responsible, I don't think I could make these arguments, you know? Then it would be like you could hate the guy for what he believes, even off platform, but I don't think that's an argument to be banned from YouTube.
Well, let's just say that construction worker is sharing stories about his relationship, right? And then he gets kicked off for that. He's not actually telling me I should have the same kind of relationship. Furthermore, I would say it's even more messed up if that coworker didn't get any kind of warning or any kind of thing like, hey, can you stop talking about it? He just got fired from work, right? We would think that, okay, if this is something that goes against the culture of the company, he should get a warning or have some kind of a chance to stop his behavior, which Andrew Tate did not get.
I disagree. He had the TOS open to him. I mean, he knew.
Come on.
No, I know his stuff pretty openly violated the TOS. But even besides that, like, he wasn't just like casually stating his personal life and beliefs on the platform. He was convincing millions of people to follow his ideology. He was making prescriptive claims. He wasn't just saying like, this is how I like to live my life. He was saying like, this is how women are. This is how men are. This is how we should behave. This is what you can do to be an alpha. So he was giving advice. And again, this would get you banned in a real workplace. There's nothing that Tate did that wouldn't get him banned in a real job. Unless, of course, he was the CEO, in which case he would probably just get like civil suits for sexual harassment. But outside of that, like he got more leeway than any regular employed person would.
Have you ever had a YouTube strike of any kind on your channel?
A couple of times. It's always like content
Yeah, yeah,
ID
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I got one, right? So typically YouTube policy is whenever someone breaks the rules is to remind them they broke that rule. And when YouTube wants to take things further, instead of just giving you a playful, like whatever, like a reminder or warning, they actually give you a strike. And if you get 3 strikes, then you're out, right? So that's a pretty fair system, right? That system that is in place wasn't followed in Andrew Tate's case. He didn't get like a strike like, hey, you can't do this content. It was like, you're done, completely kicked off. There was no chance to redeem yourself. There's no chance to change your content. That is a pretty extreme situation. Like, why was he treated differently than me and you were treated when we made content that went against YouTube's terms of service?
Well, you can get insta-deleted from YouTube if they find 3 strikes at a time. You're not limited to only getting 1 strike at a time. But there's nothing in their TOS that limits them from just banning people off platform anyway. Like, imagine
Sure, but that's standard policy.
yeah, but imagine, for example, if there was a YouTuber who dropped a video that was them just giving you like a 40-minute step-by-step instruction on how to like molest children. Which is, by the way, that video would not in itself be illegal, depending on how it's phrased. I don't think that's a 1-strike video, right? That's a 3-strike video to me. That's a you're out of there type video. So I think we can agree there are situations that are extreme enough where YouTube has the right to just sort of swing down the hammer. And given the fact that Andrew Tate's like this uber wealthy, like media magnate who's like weaponizing his if not pyramid scheme, at least like financial empire to spread his content farther than any person could on their own. Like he's not some little witty bitty channel, right? He got invited to Tucker Carlson right after he got banned. You know, I'm not too concerned, I guess, about his well-being given the social harm he's caused.
Well, I'm glad at least I got you to stop saying pyramid scheme. So that's a small win right there.
It's a pyramid-shaped scheme. So sorry, not a pyramid scheme. A pyramid shape. It is literally a pyramid shape. All the affiliates down form. So it's a pyramid-shaped scam.
We're making some progress.
a triangular scam, not a pyramid scheme. My
just
apologies.
affiliate marketing, bro. Just affiliate marketing, regular affiliate marketing that most people do. I don't think someone's money or wealth should have anything to do with like how the policy is enforced on them. I agree with you. There are some extreme cases. So if I make a video like where I'm like saying, yo, go kill these people, they probably won't give me, although I don't know how it will work, but I'm assuming, let's just assume they would just kick me off the platform. But that's like really extreme things. That's less about like your message and like the things you're saying. That's more like you're saying like really out there things. I personally don't think Tate was anywhere close to that. Like he's not inciting violence. I just think that okay, fine. Like
kind of
you
like
think
talks about like rape victims, sort of like bringing it on themselves, joking about like.
When did he, wait, when did he say that?
I said rape victims have to take responsibility for what, you know, for the rape, like, or like they
Oh.
like their part in it, you know, like wink nudge, like
Oh, no, okay. Vaush, all right, let's discuss that. Okay, because I'm actually pretty familiar with that. So if you watch the long form content on that, what he was actually saying is this. He's saying, obviously, I think rape is messed up. I don't think anyone should be raped. However, if I had a daughter and I would tell her not to go out late at night on a certain part of town because that is going to increase her likelihood of getting raped, right? So that's basically what he was saying is that with rape victims, there's things you can do to minimize the chance of rape happening. And if you just defer and just say, oh, well, I have no control in this matter, you're actually limiting yourself. And that's a pretty reasonable position to have. It's like, hey, listen, like, obviously it's not your fault, but there are things you can do to limit your odds of being raped. Rape is wrong either way. But like, you're not doing people any favors or any service by saying it's totally outside of your control. There are elements of things that you can do, like have a taser, not go to certain parts of town, that will minimize the odds, and thus it is partially with your control. That's not a crazy position.
Okay, but everyone believes there are things you can do to lessen the chance of being raped. Sometimes, oftentimes people are just drugged, or the rape happens from somebody they already know, or the rape happens like mid-sexual encounter, or they're already drunk, you know. Oftentimes there is like literally nothing they can do, you know. But in the cases where it does happen, like taking responsibility, like this is the definition of victim blaming, right? Imagine if you're in like Saudi Arabia and there's like a Western woman there who like goes to a private party as part of a like a bit of business travel, and she dresses as a Westerner would, which is legal within the context of that business party, and later like a magnate like finds her and rapes her or something. And later when this gets out, people are like, well, she wasn't wearing a burqa, you know. You wear a burqa to protect yourself against men's eyes, you know, so you need to take responsibility, like you could have prevented this. You can understand how like this is basically just like rape apologia, right? Like you're essentially just like minimizing
No, Vaush, no. I think it's not unreasonable if you're a father to a daughter in Saudi Arabia that because you don't want your daughter to get hurt, you would tell her, hey, I know you don't like the burqa, but maybe you should wear it until things change. That's not an unreasonable thing for a father to say to his daughter. If I had a sister, I would tell her that same thing if I lived in Saudi Arabia. Just like if I had a sister and she's like, Alex, you're so wise. Give me advice. I'm really worried about rape. I'll be like, okay, well, obviously rape is messed up, but there are certain things you can do to minimize the chances. That's not unreasonable advice to give.
Okay, has he ever given advice to men on how not to rape women?
Well, I mean, like, Vaush, like you just don't rape women. Like I think
Well, that's interesting,
like,
isn't it? Because if his interest is in preventing rape and his audience is young men, like I'm willing to bet 99% of the people watching him are men, it's very interesting to me that his rape prevention strategy would be reminding people that rape victims need to take responsibility, but no mention at all of what men can do to not rape women. Which
but
a
this
lot of
is
men rape women unknowingly. A lot of men rape women because they feel entitled or because they feel embittered or insecure and they want to feel powerful over a woman. They hate the fact that women, get their pee hard, so that it sort of manifests as a complex. And a lot of guys just don't know what consent is. So they'll fuck a woman who's blackout drunk. They'll fuck a woman who is like murmuring no, but the guy like pretends not to hear it because he thinks that if he gives good enough dick, like she'll actually end up liking it. Which, spoiler alert, that doesn't work. Don't do that. Like, are these tips coming through Andrew Tate, the rape preventer? I think not, and there's a reason why.
Vosh, but I think if a man is wants to rape a woman, a YouTube video is not going to deter him from it. Just like, for example, if someone is determined to go out and kill people, you're not going to convince them from a YouTube video. All you can do is give advice to potential murder victims and say, hey, listen, maybe you shouldn't walk around with large amounts of money, not a lot of change. Don't go to this part of town at night. I think it seems more reasonable to give advice to potential victims than to criminals who are going to commit an illegal act. And I don't believe. I don't believe a YouTube video can get criminals to change their behavior.
The point of Andrew Tate's streams is to change people's behavior. He's trying to teach you how to be an alpha. Why would he believe in the ability to change millions of people's behaviors? His whole Hustle Academy thing, all of this is about changing behavior, but you can't change it out of doing something bad, maliciously or otherwise.
Do you think you can change rapists from raping? Like, do you think you have that kind of...
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of rapists rape because of political opinions that they have. There's a reason why. Yes, like thinking women are subhuman. Yeah. Do you think there's a relationship between like hate crimes against black people and racism, for example? If you can convince people out of being racist, you lessen the likelihood of them doing a hate crime. Likewise, a lot of rapes do happen like unintentionally because a lot of guys don't understand consent. You can convince people out of this. You can move them from that position. But I think Tate's content was like rape maximization. I think like that, like the content form that he produced is like optimized for making young men rapists. Both in the sense that they have no understanding of and an active disregard for consent, and in that they're contemptuous towards women, which motivates a lot of bad behavior.
Okay, there's so much you said that I want to unpack. Can you give me 1 minute to take a piss and then we'll get into it?
Sure. Oh, wait, Yes, I can. I think I can go for another half hour.
All right, cool. That's all we need.
I'm sure this must be frustrating for some of you, but I feel like I'm actually doing a really, really, really good job here. Hold on 1 second. I forget which monitor my thing is on. Okay. Pigeon is like turbo heating my leg right now. By the way, I don't think the guy that I'm talking to is malicious or like dishonest in any form. I literally just think like this is a product of the culture there, you know? Like...
Okay, so let's kind of break it down like this. Let's say there's two sides to preventing rape. One is on the male side, or let's just say mitigating rape. There's no matter what you say, what you do, there's always going to be rape, right? But let's just say mitigating rape. One is on the female side, one is on the male side, right? Let's just assume that content creator chooses to address the female side. He says things like, hey, listen, as a woman, if you want to, minimize your chances of having something very bad happen to you, maybe you shouldn't go to this part of town at this time of night. Maybe you shouldn't, go home with a guy that you barely know. Maybe you should meet a guy in public first. Is that unreasonable?
I don't think it's unreasonable to give advice, but I think it has to be evaluated in the context of the situation. Given the fact that what Andrew Tate was doing on the opposite end was kind of cultivating pro-rape behavior on the guys. Like, let me put it this way. Imagine if you have a sundown town in like 1943, right? In the American South, if you're black and you're out after dark, like you're probably going to end up on a tree, you know? And let's say that like in one summer, like 3 black kids get lynched within the same week and there's outrage. And in response, the white governor of that state puts out a bulletin advising black people how to not be in those neighborhoods. Do you think like that might like kind of signal a certain set of intentions? The fact that the governor like it wouldn't be about like additional resources to catching the hate mobs or the lynchers or anything like that. It's just like, well, how do black people, you know, like just not be in those towns? It's kind of like an affirmative position for the racists in a way because they're not fixing the problem.
It is different because Andrew Tate is not in any way involved in the governance of anything at all, right? So this would be more like a a successful white leader in that town in 1920 who likes black people saying, "Hey guys, listen, we live in a pretty fucked up world, so I think for you guys it makes more sense not to do this and this and this," right? That's not an unreasonable thing for that white person to say.
If that's all, so I mean, you're right in that he's not a public official. A governor back in 1920s would have less people listening to him than Andrew Tate did today. But if the point is the power and the message involved. If black kids are getting lynched and all you say is like, "Hey, black kids, you know how you could avoid that happening? Stay the fuck out of Whitey's town." You know, if that's all you have to say, that's, as far as I'm concerned, a pro-lynching position. Because all you're really doing there is making sure people pay attention to the victims and focus on what they could have done to avoid. But rape has always happened. Like, as long as you're looking at the victim of rape for answers on how to prevent it, you will never find answers. Because women get raped when they wear lots of clothing or not a lot of clothing. When they go after asshole guys or really trustworthy guys. When they go after, like, weaker or stronger men. Women still get raped. So, like, focusing on their behavior, you know, seems to me like largely a waste of time. Most rape victims aren't like out there in thongs, like spreading their pussy on a bar table while with a blood alcohol like percentage of 10% or whatever, you know. Most rapes happen from people already known to the victim, and oftentimes it involves like inebriation or like taking advantage of or like abuse leading up to it. And in these contexts, education on consent can be vital.
But there are things that women can do to mitigate the chances of getting raped. Yes or no?
There are always things that they can do, but
Okay.
exclusively focusing on that while promoting the attitudes in men that leads to rape, kind of like it doesn't fix anything. No women are watching Andrew Tate's show, or like maybe 5, right? He's not saying women need to take responsibility for what they did to contribute to the rape to give advice to women watching. There aren't women watching. He's saying it to the men, the misogynists in his audience who want to be vindicated from the feminist accusation that modern men aren't doing enough to lessen rape, which is true. They don't like that feminism is calling men rapists, even though they tend to be, disproportionately at the very least. They don't like the idea that there's any kind of social responsibility at work there, so they want to misdirect, pull it away from that issue. Well, actually, maybe women should be more responsible. Oh, women have been getting raped in mass for all of human civilization, so maybe that's not like the right approach, you know?
You can say it doesn't fix anything, and that's your opinion, but that's not the same as it being destructive. Like, as we started unpacking that statement, it just becomes less and less bad. Now we're at a point where we're like, okay, maybe it doesn't fix anything, and you might have a point there. We could debate whether his message is fixing the problem or not helping the problem. But we can't say it's making the problem worse when he's literally just giving a very reasonable, common sense shit that I think the vast majority of people already know. This is kind of like, okay, let's flip the example, right? There's certain parts of the city that white people should not go into at night, right? I don't think there's something wrong with a black person saying to a white person who's very cavalier, right, and just thinks you can go anywhere, like, hey man, like, listen, I'm concerned about your safety. I really don't recommend you go to Compton at 2 a.m., right? I don't think that black person is contributing to the, black and white violence. I think he's just giving some common sense advice that maybe that white person needs in that situation.
Like I said, I don't think that social safety advice is always wrong. I think that it's good to be prepared, but he's not talking to women to give them advice. He's talking to men to make them feel like they don't have to bear responsibility. And again, if he's so concerned with preventing rape, I mean, listen, you didn't even think it was possible to lessen the likelihood of rape by trying to convince your audience of millions of young men to behave differently.
Vaush, I wish I was that popular. The millions of young men, how
No,
popular do you
with
think I
I
am,
mean
bro?
Andrew Tate's, but like
Oh,
any
okay.
of us, any audience. Like of course you have the power to do that. 100%. You can change their positions on things, their understanding of consent. And the purpose of focusing on the woman's role, the victim's role, is to detract from that. And he doesn't talk about consent, and he doesn't talk about like respecting women's agency or boundaries. In fact, he talks about the opposite. A lot of pickup artistry is about breaking down women's boundaries, ignoring their agency up into the line where you think they might like call for the police or whatever. Like, be as aggressive as you can because maybe it'll put a lot of women off, but the ones who are like ceding to it are going to give you pussy by the end of the night, you know? And all of this is like a bubbling cauldron of like pro-rape logic that people need to be like convinced out of. It's important.
Vosh, I do have to comment on this. You're strawmanning the pickup artist position on this. It's not about pushing the line as far as possible. It's more about being polarizing, right? Being a more polarizing individual, and then some girls will like you, some girls will not like you, right? It's not about pushing the line as much as possible. I don't
You
know any mainstream pickup channels that give that advice.
you don't know any mainstream pickup artists that have talked about pushing women's boundaries as a way of interpreting whether or not they're lower confidence or like insecure. Like
Who
negging
says
is a
that?
I don't have a list of them. It's this real. Do you really think this isn't like a tendency? Like if you went to like Return of Kings or like the Red Pill or anything, this isn't like a common part of pickup artistry?
Well, Return of Kings is no longer really up and running. I mean, that was based on what's his name?
Rouge.
Rouge, yeah, similar to your name, Vaush Rouge. He's in exile. He's like a religious like freak now.
And a
So
pickup
Return of
artist.
he's like hasn't been in the pickup community for like 5-10 years. I've been in this community for 6 years. I haven't seen like anything like that. At least not in any of like the mainstream big channels. I'm sure there's some really random unknown channel that is probably saying that, sure, but not any of the big content creators. Like there's not like it's not like us pickup artists are sitting around saying like, oh, let's see how much we can push the line. That's not happening in the community. If you want to convince me otherwise, you have to show me some kind of evidence for that.
I admit I did not prepare a series of statements on that particular subject, so I'll have to leave it there. In my experience, the idea of like negging, for example, is like testing a woman's self-confidence and responsiveness to like probing. Like all of this is about pushing boundaries. To an extent, pushing boundaries can be a healthy part of like a new relationship, as long as it's done in like a respectful and, you know, mutually sort of beneficial sense, you know, and that's like a really complicated social topic. But I don't think Andrew Tate was teaching that nuance, you know. I think like, you know, I don't think he made any statements, frankly, that would have been like about directing his audience away from like raping women, which would be nice if they wouldn't, you know, rape women, I guess.
Let me just quickly address negging. So negging, I think you're correct about that. Negging isn't about pushing the woman's boundaries. It's about bringing down her self-esteem, right? So she'd be more likely to go for you. Now, negging is a very outdated concept. It pretty much every single pickup artist who's like at least like somewhat popular in the last 10 years has universally said that negging is pretty cringe. You know, it's pretty well out there that, you know, all negging, all that shit. So like, yeah, like vast majority of like the popular pickup channels, they don't talk about negging. They usually say it's cringe. It's something that's very outdated, but it was never about pushing boundaries. It was about bringing down her self-esteem. And it's usually pretty obvious and it's pretty cringe when people do it.
I don't disagree.
Moving on to the, I just want to correct you on that real quick. Moving on to the preventing rape on men. So, okay, so this is, I think, another disagreement we have. I've heard. Okay, here's what we probably agree on. There's a sentiment in the red pill community that, you know, rape is overreported. You and I agree on the fact that rape is actually underreported, and this is going off a lot of anecdotal evidence. I have a lot of female friends who've been raped who never went to the police, so I've just seen so many evidence of that. I've had, you know, countless stories of girlfriends, girls I hooked up with, female friends who've been raped. Never once in those stories have I heard that, well, it seemed like he didn't know what he was doing. I didn't tell him no. Every single one of those stories, the girl says no multiple times and the guy ignores the no. So I've never really seen any kind of anecdotal evidence of this accidental rape.
Isn't well, a good example of accidental rape, and this isn't like you know, like accidental murder is murder, right? Or I guess it's manslaughter. But like oftentimes, like aren't a lot of guys taught that like no means yes? It's such a common attitude that there are literally like songs talking about this, right? There's that baby it's cold outside, or that pushing boundaries, or blurred lines, I think. The idea that like women when they say no are like shit testing you, and you like push through three no's to get the one yes. Again, I don't have like a list of like men's like modern, I guess, men's pickup artist attitudes on this issue, but a lot of guys seem to think that like women have this barrier that you have to push through to have sex with them, which is the barrier is like them liking you. That's true. I mean, the barrier exists, you know, but if they want to fuck you, they want to fuck you, you know. You never want to like get a woman to fuck you because they're like acceding to you being annoying. But a lot of guys seem to have that attitude. I grew up with guys like that. I went to high school with guys like that. I went to college with guys like that. And a lot of these guys just genuinely don't seem to understand that if you get 50 no's and then one yes, like you're decent chance you're raping her because she might like be coerced or pressured at that point. There might be factors you're not aware of that are sort of impeding her ability to consent. Stuff like that.
Okay, there are elements of truth in what you're saying, and there's also elements of falseness. Women will test men. So an example of this, you're going home with a girl and she's like, I'm not having sex with you, right? Typically in those situations, you wind up having sex as soon as you walk in the door. What is the woman doing, right? The woman is testing me. She wants to see, are you going to get really reactive? Are you going to be like, are you going to be like pushy? Are you going to get weird about it? You're just going to be like, oh yeah, no worries. We're not having sex, right? Like typically every time I've been in that situation, literally the girl tries to fuck me as soon as we get in the door, right? So women do test men.
But that isn't, so if you're like at the bar or something and she says that, there are a bunch of answers I think that are fine. You can say like, oh, I guess we'll see, or like, oh, if you're lost, or like, I have a gigantic dick, you would have died anyway, whatever you want to go for. But if she's like, I don't want to have sex with you tonight, you look at her and you're like, well, we're gonna have sex anyway. She's not going to like that. Like that's not the right answer, right? So if you're back at her place and she's like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable having sex, and you're like, are you sure? You sure you don't want to? Like that's not playful banter back and forth.
Right. Well, that's why you have to be able to discern when a girl is giving you a boundary or whether she's like playfully testing you.
I agree, but I think that test is part of banter, and it's something that like as a guy I engage in as well. So I think that's just part of the back and forth. But there's a difference between that and actively pushing a boundary, like when they don't want something and you try to. But a lot of guys don't seem to get this. And I've had partners that I've hooked up with, or like friends, or who have been with guys like this, who just have like this very like they get angry if a woman says no, because it feels like they feel like they're kind of entitled to sex because they had dinner together, or like maybe she led him on because like she felt his dick up in the car or some shit like that. But then later she's like, oh, I don't feel comfortable, whatever. And then they get angry, and that anger kind of makes them think they're getting fucked with, and that makes them like more likely to rape her.
Yeah. There are guys who get butthurt when they get rejected. 100% agreed. Like going back to what we were discussing earlier of this like accidental rape, like a woman isn't gonna just like, if she's not interested, she's not just gonna be like, well, I'm just gonna lay here and hope he gets it. Like women, every single story of rape I've heard, it's always been, I told him no multiple times, he wouldn't take no for an answer, right? It's not like the guy just accidentally tripped and wound up like falling with his dick on her pussy. It was always like no, and the guy ignored that. Well, it wasn't like the guy just didn't know any better.
So let's say we're talking pure malice then. Not a disregard for boundary, but an active willingness to rape, okay? People who are racist are more likely to commit racist hate crimes, right? I mean, that's kind of straightforward. Isn't it possible that people who are misogynistic and who are taught stuff like women are dogs, they don't know what's best for them, men need to lead them around, these people might have less concern for women's agency when it comes to stuff like sexual autonomy?
Sure, yeah, you can make that correlation.
Yeah, so I think like that would be another one. It's like two levels, right? You need to teach consent so people know what they're doing, and then you need to teach like I guess I'd call it like feminist advocacy, or like at least not being a misogynist, so that you have enough of a respect for women that you don't have a malicious desire to rape them.
I just don't think as a content creator, like if you have someone who hates women and is determined to like get sex at all costs, I don't think there's anything you can say or do to talk them out of it.
Well, you can talk people into it, can't you?
I don't think you could not talk me into raping anybody. I don't think you can talk someone into raping a girl.
Not you, but think about it. Like a lot of these modern alt-right terrorists who like shoot up a store and kill black people or whatever, they liked online content creators who post similar messaging. People's behavior is affected by their biases, and they get biases from media. And we are the media. Not all of it, but a good part of it. Independent content creators make up a huge portion of where people get their news these days. So if a person's watching like 8 hours a day of the Tate stir, and he's getting like, yeah, women don't know what's best for them, like false rape accusations are out of control, like women like it anyway, like women like it when men will sup them around, haha, it's just a joke, but not really. Like they get that, and this guy is like young and insecure and already doesn't like have a good relationship with women. You're cultivating that behavior. It's not a one-to-one thing, but with enough people in your audience, eventually you're going to like produce that.
I think that is a big stretch. That the stuff that Tate is saying is leading to more rape across the world. But going back to the earlier point is again like again we're talking about accidental rape. I just don't see like that happening. Like would you not agree that like pretty much every time rape happens, the woman says no, and usually she says no multiple times.
Um, Oftentimes I've noticed that accidental rape, insofar as it is accidental, is through unintentional consent. You know the It's Always Sunny bit, the like because of the implication thing? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
like that. A lot of guys don't get that. Like if you go to get drinks with a chick and you're both like mildly tipsy, and then you're like, "Oh, let's hang out at my place for a bit." You bring her back to your apartment, you have the car, and then like you're like, "Oh yeah, so you want to fuck?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know." And you're like, "I think we should fuck. That'd be fun." And you're bigger than her and you're stronger than her and she's mildly tipsy and not like that snap on the judgment anyway, she could say yes right there. And I still think that like even if that doesn't meet the legal definition of the rape, at least at the very least it's a bad thing to happen, and
The
stuff
only
like
thing
this, it's like blurred lines.
The only thing that I find troubling about that is the she's sort of tipsy part. The rest of that, I don't know. I think that's just like how most situations go. You wind up at someone's house. Sure, technically you're bigger than her, and there's the implication that something could go wrong. But like you can't. What are you supposed to do? Like as a guy about that, you're bigger than the girl.
You
I
be
mean, I think.
careful. Well, this is so clear a
Yeah,
point that It's Always Sunny made a joke about it. Like that was the point. The point was that Dennis was like a manipulative like rapist, so he would take
right,
it.
but
So there you go. Like it's enough of a thing that it was the premise for a comedy bit there. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty funny joke. I don't know if it's like It's Always Sunny. Like they make fun of like literally everything, like
But
including race shit.
the joke was that it was creepy. Like the premise of the joke
Right,
was
it is
that
creepy for
he was
sure. It is
taking
very creepy.
advantage.
Yeah, sure. It is very creepy if you get a bunch of girls on a boat and then you don't take no for an answer. And it's like they can't say no; they have to. That is creepy. Sure, I agree with you on that. I think most guys aren't getting girls out on a boat with a dirty mattress, like in the boat, like with Mac on the side. Like I think that's not really happening to most dudes.
What
I
about
don't
your
know,
apartment though? Right?
but then where are you supposed to go with a girl?
Well, I'm not saying you can't bring her back to your apartment. I'm just saying that it's a delicate situation where she might feel that she could meet with violence if she doesn't like suck your dick or whatever.
Sure, I agree.
Because
This
that
it's a delicate.
happens, you know?
I agree it's a delicate situation. I don't know. Just every story I've ever heard of rape wasn't really like the girl saying, "Yeah, I went back to his place and I never said no, but like he could, I just felt like a little intimidated." Like every story I ever heard was like, "Hey, I told him no multiple times. This guy wouldn't take no for an answer." That's every single story of
Well,
rape
what
I've ever
about
heard, and there's
what?
been dozens and dozens.
Well, what if she did tell him no multiple times, but after the fourth or fifth time that he insisted that they should, she said yes. But she's like getting the vibe that this dude is going to break her nose if she like keeps saying no, you know?
Well, yeah, if a girl says no 4 or 5 times, that should probably be the end of it. Like, yeah, I would agree that's very messed up if you're like pushing past like the first no.
But she said yes eventually, didn't she?
She might have in this hypothetical, sure. I think at that point, okay, is it rape or is it just being very pushy? I don't know. Where do you draw that line?
Well,
It's
it
probably messed up either way.
I don't think it meets the definition of rape legally, that specific scenario, but I would definitely say it's a violation of her consent and morally wrong and should be avoided.
Right. But I don't think it's unreasonable at the same token to tell girls, hey, listen, like if you want to minimize your odds or something like that happening, maybe don't go home with a guy, or at least not right away. Maybe feel out his vibe first. Like I think that's like pretty good advice for women.
But if you had a female friend who got raped at a guy's apartment and she told you about this and your response was like, okay, maybe don't go to guys' apartments then. Like, do you
Yeah,
think,
well, that would just be very insensitive on my part. Of course, I wouldn't say that to a rape victim. That would be very insensitive. But maybe later down the line, if she came to me after she processed the trauma and she's like, "Alex, I'm really worried about this happening again. What do you recommend?" I probably would say, "Well, maybe you should avoid going to the guy's apartment." That just more has to do with social tact and being sensitive.
what if she'd already known the guy for a while and she went back to his apartment after like meeting up 4 or 5 times?
Well, sometimes luck, can f you over. Sometimes like you just get unlucky. Sometimes you do everything right and you still get.
So we should focus on another aspect of the two-person rape equation, right? The person actually doing the crime then.
I think we should focus on both. I think we should help women mitigate risk. And I don't know if it's possible to help men who are. I think you have to be somewhat a sociopath to rape a girl because you have to have a lack of empathy for her feelings. Right. I think the vast majority of like regular guys would not do that because they have enough empathy and sympathy for the girl.
The-
But I personally don't think it's possible to get that kind of like a low-key sociopath to change his behavior.
this is a
But if it
really
is,
it's really dangerous to say this. Rape isn't just like a mental illness, or like the ability to rape isn't just like a brain problem. It's caused by social forces. People are more or less likely to be rapists based on predictable social factors that we have control over through the messaging we deliver people. When you say it's like, oh, you have to be a sociopath, what you're doing is saying like there's nothing we can do about it, which is a pro-rape sentiment. If you say, if there's a social problem and you're saying it is caused by an inimicable and unavoidable flaw in human design, you are preventing anything from being done about it on that end of things. You're leaving that side of the table unaddressed. The problem is, unfortunately, that like people don't want to hear it, but feminism and the Me Too movement are the things that have made rape less common. You can take a look at like projected like proportion rape statistics throughout time, and the modern second wave feminist movement has been like the big defeater in terms of like the likelihood of a woman experiencing sexual violence in her lifetime. And that's because people's political opinions changed. Guys got exposed to different ideas. A lot of guys who used to believe that women were just naturally inferior, like God made them, like Eve was from Adam's rib, like they grew up listening to other ideas about like women's liberation, and it makes them less likely to rape. Not 0% likelihood, but it does help.
I'm just not convinced that content creators or media have the power to reduce rape. You would have to present some kind of evidence for that to me. I'm open to changing my opinion. I just haven't seen any evidence that we have that kind of power. I wish we had that kind of power. I don't know if we do about that. I don't know. I'd have to see some evidence of that claim.
We talk to millions of people. I mean, I talk to millions of people, and Tate's like a million times my size. Like it's
Right.
media, people's opinions. If you can
But
influence,
what's the evidence that even though you talk to millions of people, you can change the people who want to rape a girl from raping? Like I don't know. I just personally don't think we have that kind of power, even if we have a billion subscribers.
we know that people's like likelihood of raping is affected by political influences, and we know that content creators can affect the political biases of the people who are listening. So
But is that
transitively,
but is that correlation or causation?
well, we know that there are causative forces in both cases. We know that like we can determine like through longitudinal studies on populations, like the introduction of different ideas, feminist ideas definitely like tend to reduce the likelihood of rape in a society, and we know that feminist ideas are political ideas, and political ideas can be disseminated through media, including what we do.
Do you think there's any amount of media power, or I don't know who your favorite content creators are, but let's just assume all of them adopt a pro-rape position. They're like, rape is great. Do you think there's any amount of media pressure that could get you to rape someone?
Well, me personally, of course, I don't believe that. I don't think any person believes that about themselves. And like, ask anybody,
But
what
realistically,
advertisement could get you to buy this product? And a lot of people are going to say, like, nothing. I'm immune to advertising. But advertisers know you're not. Advertisers know that you're so not immune to advertising that they'll spend billions advertising to you. Nobody's going to admit, like, yeah, I would change my mind, like, on this position I have. Like if I would like listen to a YouTube video while strapped to a chair. But we do know that the predominance of some types of media change people's opinions. We see this with news broadcasts, TV shows. Like people are affected by this stuff.
but just try to. I understand the point you're making. Sometimes it's implicit. Sometimes it's hard to be conscious of what affects you. But just try to take like a second and like really think, like objectively. Do you really think that there's any amount of media pressure has the power to get you to rape? If I'm being honest, I'm thinking about myself. I don't think there's anything. I don't care if every single one of my content creators adopts a pro-rape position. I don't think that could cause me to butch my issue on rape because I just have enough empathy to know that that would be really horrible if I was in that girl's shoes.
Empathy's learned though, and what you think is hurting the girl is also learned. Like I'm not biologically different from a guy who grows up in Saudi Arabia, but that guy probably has a way worse attitude when it comes to like women being raped, you know? The difference between me and that Saudi guy is that he grew up being exposed to different influences, one of which was media, right? It's not like a biological thing. If there are differences in the propensity for rape in different populations, that can be explained by their influences.
Well, no, I do think there's some biological elements. Of course, I think they've been talking about like the murder gene or whatever, and they've kind of identified several flips that happen in your head that can make you more likely to murder, right? So you would think if there's things that biologically make you more likely to, the big three: the narcissism, Machiavellianism and sociopathy, or sorry, or psychopathy, right?
I don't
Those are the
think
big
there's any
three.
evidence to suggest that Saudis have more of a
No, no,
biological disposition.
I'm not talking about Saudis. I'm just talking about in general. Like, forget the Saudi thing. I'm just talking about like they've identified that there's certain biological triggers that can make you way more likely to murder. Well, I think a lot of that applies to rape. I think there's certain biological things that can make you way more likely to rape.
I'm
Like,
not
I don't
saying
think.
that biology isn't a factor. I'm saying the fact that there are average differences between populations can be explained by social forces. So the average Saudi and average American probably don't have different genes when it comes to acceptance of rape, but their average opinions would differ significantly. And that's because they're exposed to different types of media, different influences growing up. All people are is nature and nurture. And nature wise, humans all over the world are basically the same, but humans behave very differently depending on where we grow up, which must be explained by nurture. And I think that as long as you latch onto that, you recognize that people are really, really susceptible, even if they don't think they are.
But what's the evidence the Saudis are more tolerable of rape? I mean, I'm
Um,
not saying you're wrong. I just want to see proof of that.
I would just say the attitude that they have towards the laws against rape, the fact that like attitudes towards marital rape, for example. Why was marital rape legal for like basically all of American history and then only recently became illegal? Like why did we become more tolerant? Did our genes change? No, of course not. Our political opinions changed on whether being married to someone made it acceptable, you know? What about attitudes towards the abuse of children? Historically, marrying underage brides by our standard was like the norm, not the exception. But now in America, if you marry a 14-year-old girl, people dislike that. Did our genes change? No, like the attitudes we have changed because of the environmental factors that we were exposed to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at like countries with the most rape. Actually, I'm curious to get to the bottom of this. So, South Africa is number one. We got Botswana number two. So we got a lot of African countries. Sweden is number six. So Sweden is actually above Saudi Arabia. That's
It,
interesting because Sweden is very liberal.
It's going to
Although,
vary depending on the way in which they report rape statistics. Sweden,
right.
for example, will report every individual rape separately, whereas here in America, it'll be collectively reported as one. So if a dad chained a daughter in the basement and raped her 70 times over like 2 weeks, that would be 70 rape cases in Sweden, and
Sure.
in America, that'd be one.
Sure, I understand those described. I mean, according to this, what I'm looking at right now, I haven't researched this too closely, but United States is number 14, way above Saudi
But
Arabia.
you
So
understand what I mean
I
about the
have to see
marital
some
rape?
evidence.
Right? Like
Uh,
the marital rape, like our attitudes on whether it's okay to have a child bride or it's okay to like rape your wife, like those have changed not because of changes in genetics, but because changes in what we consider acceptable. For most of
well,
human society, child brides were not that uncommon, but now we recognize that that's statutory rape. So,
well, yeah, I
like,
think Saudi follows Islamic law, and I think there's some really bizarre things about Islam. Not to open up that whole can of worms, but I think that's like the big issue there. I think it's more has to do with religion.
but that's cultural. Religion is disseminated through cultural signifiers, right? The media you consume, the imams you listen to, right?
Um, sure. I mean, I think that though an imam has a lot more power than media does, like in the West. Like I think those people think that what an imam says is the word of law. So you can make an argument how if an imam says, "Hey, guys, rape is okay," that certain of those fanatics will go out and rape when they normally would. I just don't think we have nearly that much power in people's minds.
Well, I would be happy to continue talking about it with you, but unfortunately, I have another conversation scheduled.
Yeah, no, no worries, man.
This
Yeah, no,
flew
it was fun.
by.
I know,
Um,
dude. No, yeah,
yeah,
I enjoy our chats. Even though we disagree on some shit, I enjoy our conversations for sure, man. So yeah, thanks for coming on, buddy.
I
Appreciate you.
enjoyed it a lot. Thank you very much for reaching out. I'd be happy to talk with you in the future.
Yeah, for sure. We'll set up again, man.
Have a wonderful day.
All right, take care, dude. Bye bye.
Take care.
All right, that was a pretty cool debate. I thought it was very amicable. Definitely big difference.
Oh, he immediately talked to his audience, which you're too nice to this guy. I disagree. I think I handled every element of this flawlessly. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think that every part of this I handled in the best possible way. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a very discursive like thing because he's we I think we talk in more or less equal. I probably talk a bit more than him. That's true, Gally or Kanye. Sorry, I saw blue name. I knew Gally was in chat earlier. Your brain on no sociological imagination. Again, I don't think he's malicious at all. Like I'm happy to talk about stuff like this, but this is basically like sociological imagination, the talk, right? I like getting the chance to talk about this. I feel like I was making a lot of really good points and like bringing them back well. I wish you'd circle to the dehumanizing rhetoric. Yeah, it's really difficult because, like, one, I'm not combing through hours of like Tate clips to like showcase just for him to go like, oh well, that was a joke or whatever. I don't want to do that. And second of all, I think you can demonstrate these patterns broadly. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I think you can make the case. I think that Andrew Tate is like a social contagion. It's not just him being a bad channel or whatever. I have never been the kind of guy, because I'm not a liberal, to just sort of sit back and rely on institutions to manage social order in a neutral fashion. Like, for example, if there was like a far right media channel that followed all the explicit rules but was like causing a wave of white nationalism, I would absolutely want that channel banned. Change the rules. The purpose of the rules is to do good, right? We make rules, we make laws and terms of service agreements in order to serve the public good, right? Or at the very least, the bottom line of the shareholders, because we're under capitalism. But like, for our purposes, it's about the public good, right? So if you could change them and make things more good, well, then there you go. I feel like you could have said something to the effect with people with Tate's ideology can justify rape more easily than a feminist can. But I did say that. I said that like 18 times in 18 different ways, right? I feel like I structured that, as best as I could. Yeah, probably Kanye. Yeah. Um, you did well for these types of convos. You need quotes and hard evidence. I know I disagree. With respect, guys, I fully disagree. I think it became clear pretty early on that like any amount of like specific quotes. First of all, there are no studies on Tate's audience, right? You need to make broader logical arguments. And the good thing about reducing this down to like logical arguments, rather than making like evidentiary arguments, you're trying to make logical ones, is that you get to move away from evidentiary based arguments, which is it's difficult to like procure these when we're talking about recent social phenomena, and you get to like get people on the basic logical structure. Well, if people's likelihood of raping is not affected by their political biases, then why have we changed our attitudes on marital rape and child rape over time? Clearly, our biology is the same, but our attitude has changed. So there's a political element to our acceptance of rape socially, right? Right? Okay. So now that we know that it's politically influenced, we can then, deduce that if you were capable of affecting people's political beliefs, you could um you could make them more or less likely to rape. And then you go back with more, okay, well, we know that we can affect political beliefs, right? I would have just liked to explain how specific Tate clips are jokes. I have absolutely no interest in playing the role of the moral police. If you think his audience would have been like receptive towards the feminist soy boy, like finding clips of him sounding bad and being like, "What about this one, huh?" That is not how you do these arguments, not even remotely, because that's what people do to me. You realize that, right? People like have giant videos of clip chimps of me making the argument that I'm a Nazi. That's not a good way of constructing these arguments at all. But people believe those. That doesn't mean they're logically sound. Why didn't you correct him on the lynching example? Because we were talking about 100,000 things. That convo was 2 hours. You guys are awfully fucking needy today. You know that? I feel like every chance that I got, I like responded with like a almost perfect debunk, comma response. And it's like, well, why didn't you do like you could? That convo could have gone on forever. My God, just give me a second to enjoy like the fun of debate before you guys are like,